very concerning, and there's a bunch of news around this that I want to talk about, including a couple of things that are absolutely not being covered in American media that I think are really, really vital. But, you know, the bottom line here, in my opinion, is that Donald Trump has officially kicked off his re-election campaign. He did it just like Nixon did with Vietnam, Reagan did with Grenada, Bush 1 did with Iraq, and Bush 2 did with both Afghanistan and Iraq. In every case, they followed Margaret Thatcher's suggestion that if you want to get your popularity up so you can get yourself reelected, and it worked for Maggie Thatcher. She was in the tank after she went after the coal miners union, the largest union in the UK. And then, you know, she had her little war in the Falklands, and suddenly her popularity was over 70%. Reagan did the same thing with Grenada, and all of us, oh, you saved those American students who didn't know that they needed to be saved. Bush 1, you know, they're throwing babies out of incubators. Turns out they weren't. But we've got to support our buddy, the Emir of Kuwait. And so, you know, that started the mess in Iraq. And by the way, at that point in time in Iraq, women had rights. They were doctors and lawyers and college professors and teachers and news reporters and, you know, right across the board. Now they're wearing, you know, burqas and stuff. I mean, it's insane. And Iran's influence is going to make it even worse. But every single one of them said, well, let's have a little war to get reelected. In fact, George W. Bush even bragged to his biographer, Mickey Herskowitz, back in 1999, that if he became president, he was going to have a real war with Iraq that would help him get reelected and accomplish everything he wanted. So Trump is just following this. Trump, you'll recall, in 2012 was tweeting like crazy that Obama was going to do that. But, you know, Democrats don't do that. Bill Clinton didn't do that. In fact, you could say, you know, that when he got into the whole mess with Kosovo, that he had waited way too long. But, you know, Clinton didn't have a little war to get reelected. Obama didn't have a little war to get reelected, at least to the best of my knowledge. Jimmy Carter is the only president in my lifetime not to have had any war anywhere. Maybe Dwight Eisenhower, too. But, you know, I think you could argue that Eisenhower actually was on the down low supporting some wars down south. But, you know, here it is. I think that, you know, and for Trump, this is a twofer. Not only does it give him the boost that you get from being a wartime president, which, you know, he was predicting Obama would do, but from his point of view, it's a way of punishing America for impeaching him. And he loves to punish people. And now Mitch McConnell is saying, well, we're going to pass a resolution in the Senate that says that if Nancy Pelosi doesn't give us the articles of impeachment within 25 days, by the way, it was 19 days ago that they voted on it. If she doesn't give us the articles within 25 calendar days, we don't have to consider them. There won't be a trial. Right. How's that going to work out? So, you know, is this going to work for him? You know, is this going to work for Trump? Some say no, but get ready for the rally around the flag effect. In fact, we're already seeing this in the media, and it's the media that sets us up for these things. You'll recall, you know, during the run-up to the Iraq War, Phil Donahue had the top-rated show on MSNBC, the #1 show on MSNBC, and he was talking about how we should not fight a war in Iraq. NBC fired him. Jeff Cohen, who was his executive producer at the time for that TV program, has been on this program numerous times talking about that. Bill Maher had a show on ABC, and you know, he also was saying we shouldn't be going to war, and you know, with Iraq, and he lost his show too. But here's the difference. You know, Reagan's little war with Grenada, it cost very little money, and there was no hangover. George Herbert Walker Bush's little war, his 100-hour war with Iraq, well, that set up an ongoing festering problem because of the sanctions. 500,000 children died because they forbade the importation of chlorine into Iraq because it could be used as a nerve gas or as a poison gas. Well, it's also used to purify water. So, you know, for a decade, children in Iraq were drinking water out of the Euphrates through the public water systems that had not been chlorinated, and they were dying of dysentery. 500,000 of them. And then, of course, that set up all kinds of problems, which Junior took care of. So, this is a very, and then Junior's wars, Afghanistan and Iraq, we've been there 17 years. I mean, these are the longest wars in the history of the United States. Great for the military-industrial complex. You can bet that Trump and all his family members and buddies were all buying defense stocks. Raytheon's is up 4%. I'll get to that in a second. But, this Sunday, there were there's these 5 major talk shows, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, and Fox, basically. Arguably on MSNBC. They featured 7 elected officials who publicly supported and voted for the Iraq War. And not a single person who voted against the Iraq War. Not one. The only person who had spoken out against the Iraq War was Chris Van Hollen. He was interviewed on Fox, but he was not a senator at the time, so he couldn't vote on it. So here we have all these guys on the Sunday shows who were all gung-ho for the Iraq War. And then, to make it even more bizarre, on Meet the Press, Jay Johnson, who was the Secretary of Homeland Security in the Obama administration, he says that Trump has the full legal authority to assassinate Soleimani without authorization from Congress. Now, the one thing that NBC did not disclose when he was on this program, and by the way, right after he said this, the Trump campaign retweeted it. Jay Johnson, Obama's Secretary of Homeland Security, says Trump had the total legal authority, right? But what NBC didn't disclose is that Jay Johnson currently is on the board of directors of Lockheed Martin. He was paid $310,000 last year in cash and stock compensation. And his stock that he owns went up 4.3% on Friday after the stock, Lockheed Martin stock, even while the overall stock market was collapsing. And then, Tim Murtaugh he's the communications director for the Trump campaign. He says, Dems and the hysterical media hope this clears that up. And then he retweets, DHS Secretary Jay Johnson debunked Democrats' claim that Congress needs to approve Soleimani strike. Now, Bush and Cheney tried to link Saddam Hussein to al-Qaeda because the authorization to use military force from 2002 says that, or maybe it was 2001, says that the president can make decisions without consulting Congress. He has to tell Congress within a certain number of days, but he doesn't have to consult them in advance, that have to do with anything surrounding 9/11, basically. And so Cheney says, well, we're using that authorization for military force. We can invade Iraq because back in 2001, there was a senior Iraqi intelligence official who met in I think it was Prague with some guy from al-Qaeda. Well, that ended up getting debunked. It had, the reality was that Saddam Hussein was actually actively killing al-Qaeda people because he saw them as terrorists. He opposed al-Qaeda. He was running a secular government in Iraq. Al-Qaeda wanted a religious government, which, by the way, is what you have now. So then, Friday night, Mike Pence, reliable toady, does the same thing. He says, assisted in the clandestine travel to Afghanistan of 10 of the 12 terrorists who carried out the September 11 terrorist attacks in the United States. Right, Soleimani, he's saying. There's actually no evidence of this. The 9/11 Commission report says nothing. Soleimani's name does not appear anywhere in it. And it unequivocally says, quote, there is no evidence Iran was involved in 9/11. Now, yeah, some of the hijackers traveled through Iran, which is what Pence was saying. But that was long before the plot was organized. This was back when they were just guys. Of course, it was Mike Pence who, on the floor of the House of Representatives in 2004, said, and I quote, weapons of mass destruction have been found. By the way, you'll find a great summary of this over in Judd Legum's newsletter at popular.info. And it turns out that Trump was given multiple options. So do you think that Trump's reelection strategy and his anti-impeachment strategy is going to work? Or is this going to backfire on him? It looks so far, particularly given that the Sunday shows all had basically gung-ho for war types of people. Yeah, they were talking about, well, maybe we need to be more careful, and I'm not sure this is a great idea. But at the, and then Jay Johnson working for Lockheed Martin saying, oh, yeah, this would be, by the way, is what you have now. So then, Friday night, Mike Pence, reliable toady, does the same thing. He says, assisted in the clandestine travel to Afghanistan of 10 of the 12 terrorists who carried out the September 11 terrorist attacks in the United States. Right, Soleimani, he's saying. There's actually no evidence of this. The 9/11 Commission report says nothing. Soleimani's name does not appear anywhere in it. And it unequivocally says, quote, there is no evidence Iran was involved in 9/11. Now, yeah, some of the hijackers traveled through Iran, which is what Pence was saying. But that was long before the plot was organized. This was back when they were just guys. Of course, it was Mike Pence who, on the floor of the House of Representatives in 2004, said, and I quote, weapons of mass destruction have been found. By the way, you'll find a great summary of this over in Judd Legum's newsletter at popular.info. And it turns out that Trump was given multiple options. So do you think that Trump's re-election strategy and his anti-impeachment strategy is going to work? Or is this going to backfire on him? It looks so far, particularly given that the Sunday... In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the LA Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt, and black tie. How his hair had been tortured into submission by a jerry curl. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that. Though, because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone and of his own accord would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave, with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll, was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloodied, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade. And yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. That's Invictus by William Ernest Henley. And this is the Thom Hartmann program. I am Jefferson Smith, and it is Anything Goes Friday, a departure from the strict discipline that happens Monday through Thursday. We're all orderly in a line, all in a row, in full alignment on any topic or subject or opinion or understanding of fact, like a chorus, like an architected, cacophonous, but nonetheless somehow harmonious gathering. Today, anything goes. 202-808-9925 is the number. 202-808-9925. Trump has managed. Yeah, I should have been the first word of my mouth. Trump has managed to do two things. Why do you think it's funny? It's not funny. It's serious business. He has managed to both criticize the Republicans who signed on to release the Epstein files and said, but we're going to find the real killers. He said, we're going to investigate. We're going to investigate people. We're going to look into the powerful people who might or might not have had relationships with Jeffrey Epstein. And then he and O.J. Simpson went out together to look for the real killers. But meanwhile, while he's saying he's going to do this investigation, no. If you want to release those Epstein files, that's a trap. Trap for who? It's so absurd to me. When I jotted it down as something we're talking about, I did not find it as funny as I'm finding it at this moment. But it seems just patently absurd. And the only way that you can get away with it is what I described the other day when I had the misfortune, it was on purpose, so I guess fortune had nothing to do with it, of watching the Fox News people, the state propaganda device, and right after there were really explosive emails from Jeffrey Epstein himself saying Trump knew about the girls, quoting, quote, knew about the girls. There's a dog that hadn't barked. I'm 75% in. Victims, name redacted. Trump spent hours with victims, name redacted. He didn't spend time with a name redacted. He spent time with that person, with that victim. And I went to Fox News, and they went through all their stories, and it was not one of them. They managed to go the whole evening without anything. But then, of course, they will report, but Trump is out there to find the real killer. He wants to investigate. I suspect that will come up here, as many things will go on Anything Goes Friday. An interesting piece about an interesting piece in CNN about what Republicans are going to do about the health plan. A good thing that happened during the longest shutdown in American history under the Trump administration. One of his many superlatives. He leads the league in impeachments as well. Leads the league in indictments, leads the league in lost lawsuits, leads the league in, does he lead the league in convictions? That's a good question. That during that time, it made clear, like, what are the ACA subsidies? Once you say ACA subsidies, it sounds, that sounds kind of technical. It actually means the part of the Affordable Care Act, the part of Obamacare that keeps health care costs down, that helps supplement the money that people pay to keep health care costs down. And those are set to expire in a month and a half. And Democrats aim to fight a good fight to say, hey, we don't want to reopen the government unless you promise to extend these. And they did not get that promise. They just got a promise for an up or down vote in the Senate, which doesn't say they'll get a vote in the House. So now the House Republicans have to scramble, that's CNN's word, scramble for a health care plan to figure out what they're going to offer. Here's the problem they've got. And this goes back almost 10 years, yeah? Ever since Donald Trump was campaigning on, we're going to get rid of Obamacare and replace it with big, beautiful health care, or whatever he called it. And they realized he had nothing. And he had nothing for a kind of important reason. Well, a number of them. One, the members of the team kind of don't care about it, kind of don't know about it, and can't really solve it. But also importantly, Obamacare was the best health care policy reform idea that Republicans had. Remember, it was born out of thinking that was done in response to, as an alternative to, a more European-style system, or in response to a single-payer system. It was the Romney Care idea in Massachusetts, which with a lot of differences, of course. And so if you were to ask the smartest sort of market-oriented theologians 20 years ago, 25, what's the best idea in healthcare? And they were on some American Enterprise Institute stage, and somebody came out and some Bernie Sanders friend was saying, we need universal health care. And some sort of in-the-main Democrat was saying, we need a public option. The other person was saying, no, what we need is a combination of some subsidies and an exchange and a market-driven solution. Well, that's largely what Obamacare is, plus Medicaid expansion. And so when they say, we're going to throw that out, what they don't realize is they'd be throwing out, in many respects, the best ideas they had. So when they say, we're going to come up with a brand new one, what do you got, bro? Public option, I'm for that. That sounds great. But for Lieberman, it would exist right now. And Lieberman, everybody should know that, because it was villainous that you didn't let that happen. It was atrocious. It is a pockmark on your history, and one that is, many people are going to die because of your Joe Lieberman's mistake. I had anticipated getting mad at Joe Lieberman this morning, but it is Anything Goes Friday, so apparently being mad at Joe Lieberman is one of the things that can go. Call-in number here is 202-808-9925. Let's see who is first this morning. Jessica from Chicago. Illa, bring the noise.
Yeah, I got a lot of noise. Jefferson, I love you. I've got so much to say.
All right.
Where to begin? So Trump needs a distraction from the Epstein files.
Yes.
He's going to start a war in Venezuela.
Okay.
He's murdered 75 innocent people. He's blown up 19 boats. He never cared who was on the boats. He never cared to prove anything about the boats. He just blew them up. The BBC News has
stick around. I brought you on at an unfair time. I probably just should have kept going. But now we will talk about Venezuela boats, etc.
I will keep going. I've got a lot to say.
Just wait just like 10 seconds.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program, and this is your program. I'm Jeff. We'll be right back. Jessica, you are on the air.
Thank you. So the BBC has articles I read, because we're not going to get them in our country. Robert Sanchez was a fisherman, and he could even navigate the waters without instruments on his boat. His father was a fisherman. Robert Sanchez was only 42 years old, father of 4, and his oldest son keeps asking about his dad, if his dad survived the explosion, and maybe he's out at sea. And the adults have to say, no, your father is gone. And then there's an article by Gustava Alex on the BBC. about another fisherman. Wilder Ferdinand, he fished for 13 years, and he fears his job is lethal. He doesn't want to go get bombed on his boat. He calls Trump a crazy man for deploying warships and thousands of troops. His wife begs him not to go fishing, and that is their livelihood there. They fish because they fish for the people, and that's their job. And then right now we have the USS Gerald Ford. It costs us taxpayers $8 million a day. There are 75 bombers on that battleship, and the military calls them guided missile destroyers. To operate the ship and the maintenance, 2,600 people. The personnel, 5,000 people, the crew and staff. And the pilots, oh my goodness, there's 75 of those fighter jets, and we have, okay, I can't keep up with my facts, sorry. They have 15,000 troops. They split that. They have like 8,000 off the coast of Venezuela, and maybe they have them for backup. They have them in Puerto Rico too. And so, Jefferson, I'll ask you this again, and I believe for all these murders that Trump could be tried at The Hague, but I hope Hegseth goes down. I'm disgusted by what our country's doing.
Yeah, I am surprised that Hegseth is still in his position. Like the display he had calling in the generals so he could give his propaganda speech. I am surprised that he is around, and I know that Trump's strategy that can be learned from is not to throw over the side allies, to make it clear who it. Except for when it's clearly advantageous to him to do so. If it benefits him, he'll do it in a moment. But if it doesn't benefit him, he likes to send a signal, stick with me. It's part of his favor trading, tit for tat kind of strategy. That so yeah, I will not go to the extent of saying that there isn't any justification for international activity by the U.S. military to address cartels, right? If you draw that line, then cartels.
Not a death sentence without any proof at all.
Yeah, Jessica, I appreciate the call. Thank you. Yeah, without due process, without certainty, without reporting afterwards. Yeah, I put it in the speech I gave last week, and then I said at the outset of the show. We'll be right back.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. You know, we've all gotten so used to living in a country where people are trying to crowdfund, like, cancer research for children. St. Jude's is a wonderful charity, but we're the only developed country in the world that needs, where you have to go to people and beg for money in order to treat children with cancer. Or Shriners, I mean, another great charity, but shouldn't we all be funding children who are born with birth defects and problems like that? We're probably the only country in the world where you can sell your life insurance policy because Social Security doesn't cover your retirement. I mean, it's probably not happening anywhere else in the world. Or reverse mortgage your home because you can't afford it. I mean, this is crazy that we are living in a country where No Kid Hungry, a charity. You can read all about it. There's a whole op-ed I wrote about this over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled America's Sickest Reality Show, Crowdfunding Cancer Care While Billionaires Hoard Billions. Check it out.
This program. Let's go to Joe from Seattle. Joe, you're on the air.
Oh, good morning, Jeff. Thank you for taking my call. Hey, I had a question for you, and I work part-time as a medical transporter, or medical carrier. And my job was called patient dropping or patient dumping.
Okay.
This is a private, I won't mention the name, it was a privately owned institution for profit. And my question is, I had to quit the job because it was just too much. But my question is, how do we judge American society anymore, Jeff?
So I want to make it clear. So you worked for a company, and thank you for sharing this. You worked for a company that would what? Pick people up at emergency rooms and take them elsewhere? Where would you pick them up from, and where would you take them to?
I would pick them up from the hospital.
Yeah.
Where they came in for emergency services.
Yep.
And if they weren't covered by, then they would say, please take this person to this address.
Yep.
And it was basically on Tacoma Skid Road. I would pick them up from the So,
can you turn off your radio in the background, by the way? I'm hearing you twice.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so I would end up dropping them off. But it got to the point where one day I literally got physically sick from what I was doing. So I just called in and left the van right where it was and quit.
Wow. And so I want to dig into this a little bit. This is fascinating. And for people who aren't aware of this practice, it's I'm not actually sure right now of the of all of the legal happenstances of kind of where things are, but I think it's against the law. I think it's opposed to ERISA. It's in contravention of the rules that you're supposed to. The emergency rooms are supposed to take people in, and so when hospital systems do this kind of stuff, or the clinics do this kind of stuff, they've got to kind of outsource it, right? They've got to kind of. And it's kind of a dark underbelly of the healthcare world, so there's not a ton of information on it. So this is interesting to get your firsthand account. If you don't mind me asking, what city were you doing this in?
Tacoma, Washington.
Tacoma, you said that, forgive me. And then, and how many people would you pick up in a day?
Well, it all depended on sometimes the weather.
Yeah.
Some of them I think were either drug addicts or prostitution.
Sure.
But, there's a rule or a law that they can't be doing that.
Yep.
And what they're doing is stealing resources that are given to them to handle this.
And how would it go down? They would, you'd get a call, you'd get a note on the walkie-talkie, you'd be out there in the parking lot and somebody would guide them to you. Actually walk us through sort of what the interaction was like.
Basically, I would get a cell phone call saying, pick this person up and deliver them to this address.
And then how would you get them in? And you drove a car or a van?
It was a van.
So you had this van, and you'd put them, and how would they get them into the van? Would you go say, hey, please, was there somebody from the hospital system would do that? Who would actually tell them that their next thing to do was to get in that van?
They'd wheel them out in a wheelchair most of the time, or I would go inside the facility and walk them out. And, of course, you get to know these people because they turn into a repeating.
Yeah, they would happen again. And so somebody would wheel them out, or you'd go in and get them, and then you'd help them inside the van, or they'd get inside the van on their own power. They'd sit in the back of the van. You'd drive them over to what you said was the equivalent of Skid Row in Tacoma. And then what would happen? You would say, hey, really step by step, you'd say, hey, goodbye, it's time for you to get out, or you'd guide them out, or what would happen then?
Well, you kind of get a personal insight to these people because you would talk with them. And, I hate to say it, but, some of them basically, some of them was definitely more than likely prostitutes. Mm-hmm. But some of these were, you would kind of ask them.
Those people living on the street, right? And that's why they're needing free health care. And that's why you're asking what's the moral honor of the country? How do we evaluate this country? How do we measure ourselves against a moral standard? And I hear that question loud and clear. But as you guide them out, you just say, hey, goodbye, see you again sometime. Like what was the dumping off like?
It was brutal. It was literally brutal. Sometimes I would reach in my pocket and at least give them a few bucks to at least get something to eat.
Yeah, and you just leave, and then you drive off and go do it again.
Right, exactly.
Oh, no, man, thank you for calling and sharing that story. The answer to the question you asked is how do we measure ourselves against a moral standard? That, my words, not yours. I don't think we do sufficiently. I think it's one of the reasons why people participate in this program, because we don't sufficiently.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I mean, what should be our moral standard? What should we hold ourselves to? How should we take care of one another? 202-808-9925.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Defying Hitler by Sebastian Haffner, a memoir. This is from chapter 17, about a little more than a third of the way into the book. At first, the revolution only gave the impression of being an historical event like any other, a matter for the press that might just possibly have some effect on the public mood. The Nazis celebrate January 30th as their day of revolution. They are wrong. There was no revolution on January 30th, 1933, just a change of government. Hitler became chancellor, by no means the Führer of the Nazi regime. The cabinet contained only 2 Nazis apart from him. He swore an oath of allegiance to the Weimar Constitution. The general opinion was that it was not the Nazis who had won, but the bourgeois parties of the right, who had captured, in quotes, the Nazis and held all the key positions in the government. In constitutional terms, events had taken a much more conventional, unrevolutionary course than most of what had happened during the previous 6 months. Outwardly also, the day had no revolutionary aspects, unless one considers a Nazi torchlight procession through Wilhelmstrasse or a minor gunfight in the suburbs that night as signs of a revolution. For most of us outsiders, the experience of January 30th, 1933 was that of reading the papers and the emotions we felt while we were doing so. The morning headline was, "Hitler called to president." That produced a certain nervous, impotent irritation. Hitler had been called to the president in August and November. He had been offered the vice-chancellorship and then the chancellorship. Both times he had set impossible conditions, and both times there had been solemn declarations, never again. Each time, never again had lasted exactly 3 months. Hitler's opponents in Germany at that time suffered from a compulsive urge to offer him everything he wanted, indefatigably, and at an even cheaper price. Indeed, to press it upon him. It's the same now with his opponents outside Germany. Again and again, this appeasement was formally renounced, and again it gaily reappeared at the crucial moment. Just so today. Then, as now, one's only hope was Hitler's own unreasonableness. Would it not sooner or later exhaust the patience of his opponents? Then, as now, it became apparent that their patience knew no bounds. At midday, the headline said, "Hitler makes impossible demands." We nodded, half reassured. It was only too credible. It would have gone against his nature to ask for less than too much. Perhaps the cup had once more passed from us. Hitler, the last defense against Hitler. At about 5 o'clock, the evening papers arrived. Cabinet of National Unity formed Hitler Reichschancellor. I don't know what the general reaction was. For about a minute, mine was completely correct. Icy horror. Certainly this had been a possibility for a long time. You had to reckon with it. Nevertheless, it was so bizarre, so incredible to read it now in black and white. Hitler, Reichschancellor. For a moment, I physically sensed the man's odor of blood and filth, the nauseating approach of a man-eating animal, its foul, sharp claws in my face. Then I shook the sensation off, tried to smile, started to consider and found many reasons for reassurance. That evening, I discussed the prospects of the new government with my father. We agreed it had a good chance of doing a lot of damage, but not much chance of surviving very long. A deeply reactionary government with Hitler as its mouthpiece. Apart from this, it did not really differ much from the two governments that had succeeded Bruning's. Even with the Nazis, it would not have a majority in the Reichstag. Of course, that could always be dissolved, but the government had a clear majority of the population against it, in particular the working class, which would probably go communist now that the Social Democrats had completely discredited themselves. One could prohibit the communists, but that would only make them more dangerous. In the meantime, the government would be likely to implement reactionary social and cultural measures with some anti-Semitic additions to please Hitler. That would not attract any of its opponents to its side. Foreign policy would probably be a matter of banging the table. There might be an attempt to rearm. That would automatically add the outside world to the 60% of the home population who were against the Hitler government. Besides, who were the people who had suddenly started voting Nazi in the last 3 years? Misguided ignoramuses, for the most part, victims of propaganda, a fluctuating mass that would fall apart at the first disappointment. No, all things considered, this government was not a cause for alarm. The only question was what would come after it. It was possible that they would drive the country to civil war. The communists were capable of going on the attack before a prohibition against them came into force. The next day, this turned out to be the general opinion of the intelligent press. It is curious how plausible an argument it is, even today, when we know what came next. How could things turn out so completely different? Perhaps it was just because we were all so certain that they could not do so and relied on that with far too much confidence. So we neglected to consider that it might, if worse came to worse, be necessary to prevent the disaster from happening. Through the whole of February 1933, everything that happened remained a matter for the press. In other words, it took place in an arena that would lose all reality for 99% of the population the moment there were no newspapers. Admittedly, enough occurred in that arena. The Reichstag was dissolved, then in a flagrant breach of the Constitution, Hindenburg also dissolved the Prussian regional parliament. There were fast and furious changes of personnel in the civil service. The book defined Hitler.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
Oh, hi. This is the Thom Hartmann program. I'm Jeff. It's Anything Goes Friday. This is George. There were bacon sandwiches in the studio this morning, and he is smelling the remnants of them and wishing he had been given even more of them. But he'd been given more than a puggo probably should have. Let's go to Joe from Seattle, Washington. Joe, you're on the air.
Thank you, Tom. Or thank you, Jeff, for taking my call. And I just called you earlier. I work for a medical transport and medical carrier.
Yeah. Forgive me, Joey. I just wanted to get if you had a final thought, because you sort of bared your soul a little bit, and I gave my best answer, and or at least I gave an answer, but just wanted to see if you had a final thought on it.
Yeah, my final thought is this began back in the Ronald Reagan era when they privatized the medical system. And fortunately, my father was a veteran, and he used the veteran.
He got VA health care.
Right. And they were just lovely people to deal with. And something has to go beyond Congress and we need to get back to the basics of society, if you ask me personally.
And by the basics, you mean basically taking care of people.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Joe, I appreciate it. Thanks for that, and thanks for the last word. I do want to jump to Frank from Thompson Falls, Montana. Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I'll make this short and sweet. I'm from a huge military family, from chief petty officers to FBI agents and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I would just like to have everybody ask their representatives why they're not honoring their oath to the Constitution. Ask them to take and release the Epstein files. And last but not least, I'd like everybody to look up Frank Zappa in 1986 on Crossfire when he called out the Republican Party for turning into fascists. He did a great interview.
I've seen the clip. I didn't see it live, but I've seen the clip, and I appreciate that, Frank. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Yep. Let's go to, I think it's Mayor from Santa Fe, New Mexico. You're on the air.
Hey, Jefferson. Thanks for taking my call. Hey, I wanted to come back around to something that occurred on the show. I think it was Tuesday.
Sure.
I don't know if you remember. A woman called in. She was really upset. Of course, we all are. And you asked her a really great question. You said, why do you think the Democrats don't fight? Do you remember that?
Yep.
And she was kind of fumbling around to find the answer, and I was on hold dying to answer that question. So I would like to take us back to Bill Clinton.
Okay.
And the moment that Bill Clinton figured out how to fundraise like Republicans, do you remember that?
Yep.
And he brought the country, into the black. He had his surplus when he left office, and he basically turned the Democratic Party into a neoliberal organization in order to be able to compete with the level of fundraising that the Republicans were doing. Mm-hmm. Now, that happened, and the Democrats realized, hey, we can bring in big money too, and they started getting super PACs, and they started getting big donors. And now, I believe the reason the Democrats have been lukewarm and kind of caving, and even when they had the chance to change the system, when they had the courts, they had both houses, they had the presidency, they were just like, oh no, we can't make big changes. We have to do incremental changes. We can't touch Citizens United because that would destabilize everything. So my thinking on why the Democrats have become Republican light, if you will, is because they like the big money. They don't want to go more towards Bernie, as they kneecap Bernie, they kneecap Mamdani. They're constantly belittling the progressive arm of the party. It's because they like that big money. And if we move to publicly funded elections, which would even the field and get rid of a lot of corruption, then they too would lose all those millions of dollars that are flowing into their coffers. And I believe that it may not be weakness on the part of the Democrats. On the part of the Democrats, first of all, back in the 70s after the Powell memo, when the pundits advised both parties to get control of the media, because that Powell memo was basically telling the Republicans, if you get control of the narrative, you brainwash people, you can start grabbing more power. Yep. The Democrats at that point said, nah, we don't need to gain control of the media. We just need to be good people, or whatever it was they told themselves. So they lost the media. They then decided they liked the dark money, and if they made big changes when they had the chance, they would lose out on that big money. So they tried to play both sides, right? They give us lip service, tell us they're for the people, but then their actions speak more like Republicans than they do like true FDR Democrats. Mm-hmm. And I believe that those factors, them summing their nose up,
important factors.
Yeah, and now we've got a Democratic Party that has no vision, no core values. They're stuck between wanting it all and having nothing, because they want the dark money, they want the big money, but they also want to be seen as the party of the people. Well, they don't have either now, because they tried to play both sides of the fence and they lost. They need to make a decision. Are you going to be Republicans or are you going to be FDR Democrats? And we have the base clearly wanting what Bernie and AOC and Jasmine Crockett and Mamdani are selling. And then again, you have these Democrats that are just going along with the ride. And I would propose to all of us that, yes, part of it is weakness and an inability to get ahead or strategize very well about the future. But the other part of it is they've lost their way in terms of who they serve. And they've gotten a little bit too comfortable with the big money that's also flowing into their pockets, thanks to the way Clinton changed the way they fundraise.
All right, Mayor, I'm going to leave it at that, and let me respond. But thank you for the call.
Yes.
There's a bunch in there. So First, about the dough. And here's where I want, if you don't know that AOC or Bernie Sanders is your favorite kind of Democrat, I'm going to also make the case why you also don't want a bought and paid for government. Okay? So I do think that, so I want to delink those things a little bit. They're related, but I want to delink them a little bit. A friend of mine who worked on the Obama campaign and then worked for our governor, had, the way he would tell the story was he would blame Tony Coelho, who when he was in the House of Representatives, sort of shifted the fundraising apparatus of the Democratic congressional campaigns, DCCC, to be a little more K Street friendly and a little more corporate friendly, and to try to bring in that dough. And he thought that was a huge turning point in what in the Democratic Party, and that was prior to Clinton. And of course, Clinton then showed, like, look what I can do, and raised a bunch of dough for other candidates, and built power and was president. And was an enormously popular president. The thing I want to shine a light on is very often we think about the money in politics stuff, and then if first say, well, if we got money out of politics, everybody be like AOC. I don't think that's how it would be. I do think that a candidate like Mamdani has a much better chance in a publicly financed regime, and my N=1 data set is in fact his election, where he had access to small donor matching funds, and but for that, I don't think would have been as a very credible candidate. And I said this the other day, but I want this to sink in. One of the reasons it matters is because so much of an election is, in fact, its own kind of self-fulfilling or self-defeating prophecy. If you hear early on that the given candidate has a chance to win, you pay attention to them. If you think they don't, you don't pay as much attention. If you think somebody has a chance to win, they're more likely to get endorsements, additional support. Somebody like Ted Kennedy endorsing Obama early, and that gets other people to endorse him, right? Allows you to build momentum. And so much of the story, because an early poll in a mayor's race tells you not very much. It basically tells you name recognition. So, and journalists know this. They're not dum-dums. And so they look for anything else. Say, okay, well, this person's the most famous. We don't know they're the best, but this is what an early poll might say. And there's not that many polls in a mayor's race, for instance. And so the other number that's publicly accessible is like who's raised the most money. And you publish that, and it's like, oh, so I guess this is probably a list of who's stronger. What changes in a publicly financed election is that if you're already kind of capped, the amount of public funding is capped, and the secret money is secret, well, at least in the reporting, it becomes less of a focus. That fundraising horse race becomes less of a focus. The reason that's good is because then the campaign can be a little bit more about ideas. And whether you like Mamdani's ideas or don't, you probably agree that the election should be based more on ideas and less just about that numerical financial horse race. It should not just be an auction. I want to say that about that. I also want to say there is another piece that I want to add to what you had to say, which is in fact public opinion, which is what's different now. And I really appreciate what you said, and I will need to make this a topic, I think, next week. That part of the challenge is that there has not been a meaningful, sufficiently strong, let's say, pro-social, progressive, pro-democracy movement in this country for the last 50 years. And that leaves us kind of fighting allies, because what we're really wanting is more drops to drink in that ocean. I'll say more about that after the break.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
From speakers to speaker circuits to online to radio, we need stronger pro-democracy movements. Mark from Seattle, Washington, you're on the air.
Hey, Jefferson, this is Mark Taylor Canfield from Democracy Watch News.
Yeah.
And you're speaking my language, because this is exactly the kind of topics that we've been discussing at Democracy Watch News. And also, and so I have a quick report on our election for mayor, which involves some of those very same issues you just mentioned. But I also wanted to let people know that on November 21st and 22nd, there will be nationwide protests by artists against the Trump regime's attempts to stifle freedom of speech. And you can go to falloffreedom.com for that. So artists, galleries, libraries, concert halls, and other arts venues all across the country will be participating. And as an artist and musician myself, I think that's very important. But what just happened here in Seattle is exactly what you were talking about. So we have a democracy voucher program in Seattle. The voters approved. It's publicly financed, and every registered voter gets $100. You can divide that into $25 segments, and so you could potentially donate to 4 different candidates in our city elections. Our city elections are nonpartisan to begin with, but we just elected a Democratic socialist mayor, and her name is Katie Wilson. She's the former executive director for the Transit Writers Union. She's never held elected office before. Her the incumbent, her opposition in this race, Mayor Bruce Harrell, outspent her 5-1. But she used her democracy vouchers to run her campaign. And although the final vote was really close, it took over a week for them to actually, for her to declare her victory, which was just the other day. But her election has also been compared to Mamdani's election in New York City. And I think it's very surprising to the political pundits, considering that he outspent her by so much and that he's an incumbent with a big support from corporate entities in this city. And it's a pretty amazing story. She gave me, Mayor-elect Katie Wilson gave me an exclusive interview on election night, which I thought was really telling, Jefferson, because she made the corporate media wait, knowing that I was with a nonprofit news organization. So she preferred to speak to me, which I think was wonderful. So thank you for that. But she very much similar themes to Mamdani, populist themes of affordable housing, mass transit, et cetera. And I think it's a strong statement, when she says her campaign wants land and wealth stewardship by the community, not by corporations. That's a very strong statement in the city where huge corporations like Amazon,
some of the biggest in the world,
have always had, a huge influence on local politics. So here we go. We have a Democratic socialist for mayor. It's a new day in Seattle, and a lot of people are really excited. And she told me herself in our interview that she considers this a new pro-democracy movement. And she also mentioned Mamdani's election as another example of that. So some people, at least, are getting really involved. There is a big pushback against the Trump regime and his authoritarianism.
So,
and
Mark,
I think,
let me ask.
Mamdani and Katie Wilson are great examples of that. So keep up the work, all you people out there working with independents and
so Mark, I'm going to interject. I'm going to interject,
Yes.
and so thank you for that. If she'd be down, I'm saying this also to Sean, she might be somebody interesting to interview next week. And if you had contact information or want to contact the show, that might be interesting to talk about, and it might be interesting to talk with her. But the thing I will say, and this I just got to say, to everybody who's an indivisible chapter, everybody who's a precinct person, everybody's looking for something in their local community, that there really is a chance in cities around the country, not every city, not every town, but a bunch of cities and a bunch of towns, to pass publicly funded elections. You can do it voucher style like Seattle, or you can do small donor matching like New York. There's a couple different models. They both have reasons to recommend them, and you give a chance for new candidates to emerge.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Donald Trump lost, voter suppression won in 2024. That's the headline over at HartmannReport.com, and just a brilliant article written by Greg Palast exclusively for the Hartmann Report. He writes, Trump lost. That is, if all legal voters were allowed to vote, if all legal ballots were counted, Trump would have lost the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Vice President Kamala Harris would have won the presidency with 286 electoral votes. And if not for the mass purge of voters of color, if not for the mass disqualification of provisional and mail-in ballots, if not for the new mass vigilante challenges in swing states, Harris would have gained at least another 3.5 million votes, topping Trump's popular vote tally by 1.2 million. Greg brings us the numbers. He lays it out. You can read it over at HartmannReport.com, absolutely free. It's titled Trump Lost, Vote Suppression Won at HartmannReport.com.
TomHartman.com. Check it out.
The people who support this program. What I have been hearing about how do we build strength in a pro-democracy movement? How does that therefore give more wind at the backs of pro-social, pro-democracy, pro sort of baseline morality Democrats in partisan races and others in nonpartisan races? We had really good thoughts from a caller about how that connects to money in politics. It's not the whole story, but it's a big part of the story. And over the break, we had an interesting conversation about the mayor's race in Seattle, which also the upstart underdog candidate in Seattle won also with the benefit of publicly financed elections. And I'm telling you, folks, if you're looking for something to work on, this is something that could be won. You go to Congress, you don't got a chance, right? I'm saying someday maybe, but not this Congress and not this Supreme Court, not this presidency. But you go to a town, and not just like Seattle and not just like New York. You do it in Madison. You do it in lots of towns. Maybe some of the Yoopers could get it done. There are towns around, there are cities around this country that absolutely could pass a public funding match or a voucher system for your elections. Now, this has some real advantages. For one thing, you start allowing for new voices to get in. It also helps provide sort of like a foundation funding stream for new organizing, for new candidates, to help build, to help sort of compete with this morass of secret money that is drowning our democracy. And we have a chance for the people's money to help it compete a little bit. It also means, and here, the subject of sort of, I brought up Tony Coelho, our caller brought up Bill Clinton. And very often we think about sort of the big fights, things like universal health care versus public option versus Obamacare versus just let everybody die, okay? And there's a range, we know that fight. We know the fight on abortion, right? There's big fights that get big attention. But what the pernicious effect of imbalanced money buying off politicians and is in things you don't pay as much attention to. Things like a Telecommunications Act, which ends up being a big giveaway to media organizations. The kinds of stuff that isn't, maybe antitrust regulation, which will get more and more public awareness, but is the kind of thing that not everybody's paying attention to all the time. That it's those little things, those secret deals, the stuff that doesn't get everybody on social media talking about. That's where that's where the impact of financial and political favor trading is even more pernicious. So wherever you land on some of those big issues, you still don't want. And that's why when we did public financing in Portland, it passed. When we did campaign finance limits in Portland, we got it passed with 87%, 89% of the vote maybe, and that with significant majorities of Republicans. Most people don't want their politicians to be bought and paid for. The people who do want it are the people who benefit from that. But that's not most human beings in this country. So I appreciate that topic. It's not the whole answer, but it's a big part of the answer. Mario, before we go to break, you are on the air from Also Bring the Noise, Chicago, Illinois.
Jeff, thank you very much for taking my call. The only thing that I have to say is I let it call and a lot of pain about what's happening to us. Just get a sign and get in the corner. And be sure to tell people to vote, people to get involved. Don't stay idle. Go and do something. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Mario. And to Larry in Los Angeles, California. And we appreciate our LA listeners and viewers.
Hi. I called in to talk about AI and its racism and other biases.
Yep.
And in fact, it's self-aware. It is artificially self-aware that it is racist.
Yeah.
I just asked one of the AI engines, has AI engines become more and more racist? And it says, yes, it has.
Yep.
Now, but then you had a caller that called in and tried to blast Bill Clinton and tried to blast the Democratic Party as being feckless and weak.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, that got my blood boiling. The Democratic Party has seen 51 million jobs created in the last 35 years. Republican Party seen 1 million.
Say the number again. Say the number again.
51 million over the last 35 years, the Republicans, 1 million.
Which is more? You're the math guy. Which is more, 51 or 1?
How can you call those two parties being basically light and Republican?
Yeah.
The Democratic Party is the opposite of the Republican Party. Now, we do have some voters who somehow get confused between evil and good. So when they go to the polls, they don't understand, Bill Clinton, what did he do? There's something that he did I didn't like. So I'm going to give the Republicans a chance to screw us again and crash the economy like they always do every time they get the White House. How can anybody just sit back and look at those two parties and think they're almost the same? One gives us a recession every time, and the other one sees jobs created. One cuts the deficit, the other one grows it. It causes us to do a fourfold increase. What is wrong with the American people?
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate you, and I'm even happy to talk about AI after the break. But I appreciate the point that one of the biggest lies ever told was the lie there was no difference. You can argue there should be a bigger difference, but if it says no difference, ain't paying attention. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Today we're reading from Dorfman and Mallart's book, How to Read Donald Duck, Imperialist Ideology in the Disney Comic. And this is from the preface to the English edition. This book was first published in Spanish. To say that this book was burnt in Chile should not come as a surprise to anyone. Hundreds of books were destroyed and thousands more prohibited and censored. It was written in the middle of 1971, in the middle of the Chilean revolutionary process. Copper had been rescued, the land was being returned to the peasantry, the whole Chilean people were recovering the industries that during the 20th century had been the means of enrichment for Mr. Rockefeller, Grace, Guggenheim, and Morgan. Because this process was intolerable to the United States government and its multinational corporations, it had to be stopped. They organized a plan which at the time was suspected and since has been confirmed by Mr. Kissinger, Ford, and Colby to have been directed and financed by the United States intelligence services. Their objective was to overthrow the constitutional government of Chile. To realize their objective, an invisible blockade was imposed. Credits were denied, Spare parts purchased for industrial machinery were not sent, and later the Chilean state bank accounts in the U.S. were blocked, and an embargo preventing the sale of Chilean copper throughout the world was organized. There were, however, two items which were not blocked: planes, tanks, ships, and technical assistance for the Chilean armed forces, and magazines, TV serials, advertising, and public opinion polls for the Chilean mass media, which continued for the most part to be in the hands of a small group which was losing its privileges. To maintain them with those of the U.S., their media prepared the climate for the bourgeois insurrection, which finally materialized some years later on the 11th of September, 1973. Each day, with expert U.S. advice, in each newspaper, each weekly, each monthly magazine, each news dispatch, each movie, and each comic book, their arsenal of psychological warfare was fortified. In the words of General Pinochet, the point was, quote, to conquer the minds, end quote, while in the words of Donald Duck in the magazine Dislandia, published in December 1971, coinciding with the first mass rallies of native fascism, the so-called March of the Empty Pots and Pans, the point was to, quote, restore the king. But the people did not want the restoration of the king, nor of the businessman. The popular Chilean cultural offensive, which accompanied the social and economic liberation, took multiple forms: wall paintings, popular papers, TV programs, motion pictures, theater, songs, literature. In all areas of human activity, with differing degrees of intensity, the people expressed their will. Perhaps the most important arm of this offensive was the work of the state publishing house, Quimantu, a word meaning sunshine of knowledge in the language of the Chilean Machupe Indians. In 2.5 years, it published 5 million books, twice the amount that had been published in all of Chile during the previous 70 years. In addition, it transformed the content of some of the magazines it had inherited from before the popular unity government and created new ones. It is in this multifaceted context, with the people on the march to cultural liberation, a process which also meant criticizing the mass cultural merchandise exported so profitably by the U.S. into the Third World, that How to Read Donald Duck was generated. We simply answered a practical need. It was not an academic exercise. For the Mad Dog Warriors on that September 11th, there were no paintings on the walls. There were only enormous stains which dirtied the city in memory. They, using the fascist youth brigades, whitewashed all the signing, many-colored walls of the nation. They broke records, murdered singers, destroyed radios and printing presses, imprisoned and executed journalists, so that nothing would be left to remind anybody of anything about the struggle for national liberation. But it was not enough to clean these cultural stains from the street. The most important task was to eliminate all those who bore the stain inside themselves: the fighters, workers, peasants, employees, students, and patriotic soldiers, to eliminate these creators of a new life, to eliminate this new life which grew, and for all that we created. This book, conceived for the Chilean people and our urgent needs, produced in the midst of our struggle, is now being published far from Chile in the uncle land of Disney, behind the barbed wire network of ITT. Mr. Disney, we are returning your duck, feathers plucked and well roasted. Look inside, you can see the handwriting on the wall, our hands still writing on the wall, Donald, to go home. This is written in 1975. And then this from David Kunzel's introduction. The names of the presidents change. That of Disney remains. 46 years after the birth of Mickey Mouse, 8 years after the death of his master, Disney's may be the most widely known North American name in the world. He is arguably the century's most important figure in bourgeois popular culture. He has done more than any single person to disseminate around the world certain myths upon which that culture has thrived, notably that of an innocence supposedly universal, beyond place, beyond time, and beyond criticism. The myth of U.S. political innocence is at last being dismantled, and the reality which it masks lies in significant areas exposed to public view. But the great American dream of cultural innocence still holds a global imagination in thrall. The first major breach into the Disney of this dream was made by Richard Schickel's The Disney Version, The Lifetimes and Commerce of Walt Disney, the book How to Read Donald Duck.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We do have this ongoing topic of, that's what I'm really interested in, of what does it take to build a genuinely pro-democracy movement? And I've appreciated the callers, including Larry's admonition, let's not get it twisted, and reminding us of the job record differences between Democratic and Republican presidents over the last enough years that it no longer seems to be an accident, and that we have an error in our collective understanding and rhetoric and consciousness and discussion and discourse. We equate what is good for rich people with what is good for the economy. And it's hard to parse those separately, because you'd think that the people, well, if you're rich, you're the people that know how to make money, so whatever you say about how to make money is probably what we should do. And you hire a lot of people, so whatever's good for you is probably what's good. And there are absolutely lessons to be learned from titans of industry. There are absolutely lessons to be learned about industrial organization, around capital deployment, around innovation. There's any numbers to be learned. And by the way, captains of industry learn also from nonprofits and from the public sector. Many of industrial organizations' lessons were actually taught originally by the military. Okay, but for good or for ill. But figuring out how your company can be great, how to beat other people in that competitive pursuit is different than figuring out how it's just very importantly different from how an overall economy can function well. But it can be hard to divide those things in our head. And because it's hard to divide those things in our head, it makes it harder when so much of the communications capacity, the vast bulk of communications capacity in the country, are owned by people who kind of like that argument. Kind of think, yeah, when it comes to the money stuff, listen to us, defer to us. You can take care of that other thing. You can go have your fight about abortion. Go have your fight about race. Go have your fight about which comics have gone across the line or not. You guys have your little fights, but just listen to us when it comes to the money. And they have the cannon, larger than cannon size, the howitzer size communication throughput to be able to make that kind of the dominant mindset in the country. But it's importantly wrong. There are really important lessons about it that when you start doing that, I mean, literally that's what happened in the run-up to the Great Depression. We just pivoted economic policy too much towards the corruption side, towards the, hey, look, now the pigs are at the trough, let's eat everything. And they start getting a little too fat, and then everything else stops working quite as well. That having a sensible, smart economic policy is not the same thing as having an economic policy that is best for, name your favorite or least favorite super rich person. And when I talk about that, I'm not talking about the doctor lawyer making a few $100,000 a year, even the person making $1.1 million a year, which is a lot of money. I'm talking about people with the money of nation states. And at some point, that becomes not only economic policy, that becomes democracy policy. Because if you got a nation state walking around wearing some, tech bro sweater vest, that's a battleship in the Pacific size piece of power walking on the streets of Manhattan. And that is not only economic policy, that is policy writ large. Let's go to your calls, because this is Anything Goes Friday. Pearson from Lamarck, Texas. Go ahead.
Hey, theoretical Good Friday afternoon. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yep.
Okay. So can you imagine someone like Donald Trump or one of his adult children handling a job like that gentleman from Seattle, Joe, describing that heartbreaking story of his? Do you think they could handle something like that, jobs that we are left to do in the real world? He couldn't even handle McDonald's for 20 minutes by the fry machine.
Yeah.
They are so disgusting and despicable. Look at the way he behaved with that buffoon in the White House in the Oval Office when that guy passed out. what did he do? He stood up and facing away from those people, just feet away from him, he just looked blankly into space.
No,
that's how they deal with.
So,
say again?
So a friend of mine, I hear you. A friend of mine, a guy named John Kitzhaber, was governor of my state and was an emergency room physician. And I remember not only the skill difference, but the compassion difference. Multiple times, John would, Dr. Kitzhaber, whatever, Governor Kitzhaber, whatever you call him, all three things work, would rush towards the person who fainted, would go help the person who was having a heart issue or some other health issue. And not only because he was trained to do so, but because he actually gave a damn. And anybody, and to my Trump voting friends and to our Trump voting listeners and viewers, do please at least look at the expression on his face. And
and what about his?
Yeah, go ahead.
And what about John Kennedy? He looked and he immediately ran away. He didn't go to get help.
Yeah.
Normally, when human beings see someone in distress and you leave, you say, "Oh, I'm going to go get help. I'll be right back."
Yeah.
He just looked and he left.
Yeah.
And there are disgraces just like Nancy Mace. What did Nancy Mace do? Let me ask you, does she carry a cardboard placard with her name on it and a collapsible podium that she carries in her briefcase everywhere she goes? Because when she went to the airport recently, there's airport security footage of her leaving her car. Nobody was tracking her. Code Pink wasn't there making fun of her. There was no paparazzi around, but she had the audacity to unfold her little podium and some random place out by a railroad track complain about the work ethic of the people at the airport who aren't getting paid because of her party while she gets a salary. I've got a 58-second poem I'd like to share about her if I can.
Pearson, we've already been on it for now 3 minutes. Let me get to Tom. If you want to get back in the queue, feel free. But I want to get to Tom because we've got only 2 minutes before the break, and he's been waiting a long time. Tom, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, thanks. I want to thank you for something you said about democracy during Wednesday's program. You identified the importance of humility to a healthy democracy, Jefferson. I really appreciate that thoughtful insight. It's powerful and inspiring, sir. And I'm wondering if you could please expand upon what you mean about humility being crucial to democracy and perhaps devote a future segment to discussing it.
Yeah, I'll say yes to both. I will, and maybe Sean can help keep us honest, that I will do that, or I will intend to do that and try to do that if she helps me remember. But I'll give you a quick answer now. So first of all, I'll say at least in two ways. One is, it is a commitment to humility, not just it requires humility. If you decide that you want to make decisions with other people, you are deciding a decision structure rooted significantly and importantly in humility. This had not dawned on me. I didn't come up with this, but it rocked me as I started to think about it. Because it's its own truism. It's its own, push and shove dictionary. Look under push, it says shove. Look under shove, it says push. It is an a priori. But I won't limit myself just to the a priori. I will explain further. It is saying I'm not committed to being right all the time. I'm not committed to getting my way all the time. Those are two different things. That it is, if you say, I believe in the idea that we should make decisions together, I am saying that I don't always get to choose. And that is, just, I think, hugely important. Second, in terms of therefore how to make it work, or maybe not even therefore, also how to make it work, I think it includes a little bit of that. And you got to make sure that it doesn't, you got to make sure that doesn't alleviate your vigor, doesn't reduce your energy to fight for core moral precepts, key objectives, key things you believe in that need to be fought for. You've got to be able to maintain those two potentially conflicting ideas until function. But those are my two thoughts on humility. But Tom, I really appreciate the question.
You bet.
Yep.
Thank you.
You be well.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program. It's going by. This Anything Goes Friday. 202-808-9925. Your calls after this. And we are back. I think John from Minneapolis, Minnesota wins the Most Patient Listener Award. John, you are on the air.
Yeah, I want to talk about ethics, values, humility, all of those things that I think people need to have, participate in a flourishing democracy. Because if those aren't there, democracy is not going to guarantee that we're going to have a humane society. And by that I mean, like, for instance, during Ronald Reagan's first administration, I think it was Mike Douglas, the actor in Wall Street. He played this, character Gordon Gekko, and he said, greed is good. Yeah. And when you make statements like that, you basically undermine all of the precepts of both Western and Eastern civilization. I don't know of any religious background, either in the East or in the West, that teaches greed is good. Mm-hmm. And, then you have other people like Ayn Rand, and then the whole basis that the philosophical basis that is built on neoliberalism expresses that idea. And even John Maynard Keynes said, greed and avarice must be our gods for a while longer until we have enough money that then we can lift all boats and we will have then peace on earth, or something along those lines. And the idea is just stupid. At some point, people are going to have to accept their situation, and they're going to have to value something that it doesn't get a payoff materially. And this is mocked all the time, and especially by these people who call themselves Christian nationalists, because they basically just take a yellow line in their Bible and they just edit all of that out. And then when it comes to lies, they lie like, I've never seen. If Donald Trump's mouth is moving, he's lying. And why? People have brought that out, like David K. Johnston, and I have no association with it. I'm not putting a plug in for his books. But the media, which also lies a lot and becomes propagandist in to the nth degree, did not bring that up about the Trump family. So, I can go on and on, but I know other callers are...
Let me go to John. Thank you for your thoughts. I will just respond to the first thing you said with this. It's a John Kenneth Galbraith quote. The modern conservative is engaged in one of man's oldest exercises in moral philosophy. That is the search for superior moral justification for selfishness. Let's go to Mark from Signal Hill. Mark, you're on the air.
Yeah, I just wanted to urge some caution with they had those 20,000 emails released, and they found 2 that had hints to the Epstein thing, that those might be just planted so that they can later say, oh, I just made those up. So just a little caution, like when they got to Dan Rather by giving him a false letter.
Yeah, except it came from the estate through a subpoena, so it would have to be kind of a weird thing to slip in there. But I get your point, Mark.
Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. I have 8 suggestions for Democrats for messaging. Democrats seem to have a messaging problem right now. First, Democrats must frame the fight in simple moral terms. Don't be wonky like, hey, we need to expand social safety net. No, say no child in America should go to bed hungry. Second, Democrats need to stop playing defense and instead seize the populist high ground. Like when FDR said, they are unanimous in their hate for me and I welcome their hatred. Third, ruthlessly define the Republican opposition and the morbidly rich oligarchs who own them. Fourth, tell stories instead of facts. Reagan did this with the black welfare queen. He had to lie about it, but we've got lots of great stories. That's number 4. There's 4 more, and they're all over at HartmannReport.com. The title of the article is, "If Obama had sent a mob to kill a cop, Republicans would never let you forget it." And it's all about how Democrats can reinvent their messaging to start winning elections big. Check it out.
Let's go straight to your calls. CJ from Shreveport, Louisiana.
Hey. Okay. This is about your opening rant.
Yeah.
About the ACA, Affordable Care Act, and where it came from.
Yeah.
I'd like to see if I can read a little bit here. Number 2, mandate all households to obtain adequate insurance. Many states now require passengers in automobiles to wear seatbelts for their own protection. Many others require anybody driving a car to have liability insurance. But neither the federal government nor any state requires all households to protect themselves from the potentially catastrophic cost of a serious accident or illness. Under such and such plan, there would be such a requirement. This mandate is based on 2 important principles. I could continue, but what that is actually from, and where I said such and such, the word is actually the Heritage Plan.
Yeah.
That was from Stuart M. Butler's Assuring Affordable Health Care for All Americans.
Yep.
Heritage Lectures number 218,
yep.
Published, and it's on their website, and it's dated October 1, 1989. When pressed on this is the first appearance that anybody's been able to find of the concept of an individual mandate, which was the most hated aspect of the ACA in polling.
Mm-hmm.
And the earliest anybody could find mention of that, and then he later tried to say that he came up with it as an answer to Hillary Care, except Hillary didn't announce Hillary Care until 1993.
Yeah. No, CJ, thank you so much. In fact, and let's get that into Sue's stack. That is helpful because we know the origins. And to be clear, that is not me knocking Obamacare. That is me trying to help people understand, like, getting anything that helps anybody through Congress over the last 20 years, the last 30 years, last 35, it's been really, really hard. Like ever since Tip O'Neill and Jimmy Carter were no longer in power, it has been really hard to pass something that's in fact pro-social, actually pro-people, really, really hard. And so, like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, et cetera, getting through the ACA, including Medicaid expansion, is an enormous legislative accomplishment. And I don't want to take anything away from that at all. I do want to say, and I appreciate what you're saying, but remember the origin of this, when the Republicans come out and say, no, we got a better plan. Nah, man, your Heritage Plan already was baked into this deal. You don't have a better idea.
Mm-hmm. That's about, Anyway, there was a lot more to it. Actually, that plan was inspired by an earlier Heritage Plan called a National Health Plan for All Americans, which was dated January 2nd of 1989. Reagan was still president.
If you have that stuff, do send it if you would, and post it. And you can tag me if you want. I would actually love to see that because I know the basic history, but I haven't read that document.
Yeah. Anyway, that is what inspired Romney Care.
Yep. Exactly.
Romney Care.
Exactly. That part I know.
And also there was a bill that was based on it. Before the ACA, called the HAA, Healthy Americans Act, also known as the Wyden-Bennett Bill. And they were debating that in Congress. Republicans were pushing it hard up until towards the end of 2008 when Obama got elected.
Yeah, no, I remember. Wyden's a friend, and somebody who's a friend of my family's, and somebody who has been working on healthcare before Obama was elected. But CJ, thank you for that history. It's really helpful. Let me jump to Lisa from Trevor, Wisconsin. Lisa, you're on the air.
Hey, nice to talk to you again. My topic for today is AI, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I've been following the issue for the last couple of years or whatever. I'm highly, highly concerned with what's going to happen down the road. I believe, obviously, that the corporations are going to take huge advantage, to lay off all of the people they possibly can. And at some point, obviously, we're going to need the government to do something, because if we lose 50% or more of the jobs that are out there to AI, people won't have any income coming in to feed themselves, to have a roof over their heads, et cetera. We're going to be back to the pre-Roosevelt days. And obviously the current leadership, if you want to call it that, the Republicans don't give a GD about what happens to the average people as long as they can make money. Now, of course, the caveat to them is if people don't have money, you know, what are they going to be purchasing from the corporations? But in the meantime, before we get that solved, you know, I think there's going to be a lot of hurt to the average people, and we need to turn this boat around right now to make sure that we don't have a situation where we go, you know, for 5, 10, whatever years with people suffering as more and more people are getting laid off because of AI. Yep. So that's my huge, huge concern. I think that we need to be looking toward the future and prepare accordingly.
Lisa, it's time for the biggest thing happening in the world. Technologically, it's the biggest thing happening in the world. It's impacting every single sector. Friends of mine are leading AI companies. I was just with one of them, their company launch last week, and my opening line was, "Who do you want in charge?" I also want to give a plug to Larry, one of our best listeners, who wanted to talk about the racial impact, racist algorithms in AI. The most prominent example that I'm aware of was the Compass racial sentencing scandal, which was erroneously predicting people based on color and their recidivism likelihood. But thank you, Lisa.
Listening to the Thom Hartmann program. Call 202-808-9925.
All right, we'll talk about AI. We'll also do a segment on AI next week. I got a bunch of stuff that I've been thinking about on that. It's hugely important. Thank you, Lisa. We'll be right back here on The Thom Show.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Cokeland, The Secret History of Coke Industries and Corporate Power in America by Christopher Leonard. This is from the preface. On May 18th, 1981, 4 Wall Street bankers traveled to Wichita, Kansas. They went there to make an offer to Charles Koch, the CEO of an obscure mid-size energy company. The bankers from Morgan Stanley wanted to convince Koch to take his family's company public, offering shares for sale on the New York Stock Exchange. Their deal was squarely in line with the conventional wisdom of corporate America at the time. Going public was seen as a natural progression for companies like Koch Industries, offering them access to big pools of money and promising enormous paydays for the existing team of executives. All it required from the CEO was to surrender control. Morgan Stanley, in return, would collect a small fortune in fees. Charles Koch was 45 years old. He had run Koch Industries since he was 32 when his father died suddenly. He was trim, tall, and had an athlete's build. He spoke quietly in meetings and seemed almost passive. The bankers laid out their plan to take Koch public. They revealed what, to most executives at least, might have been the most significant detail. If Charles Koch agreed to the deal, he could earn $20 million overnight. The bankers seemed incredulous when they prepared a confidential memo about Koch's reaction. "He does not want this cash," the memo reported. Charles Koch calmly explained to them why their offer made no sense. His company was breathtakingly profitable. It operated in vital, deeply complex corners of the American energy industry. During the 1980s, Koch Industries was the largest purchaser and transporter of U.S. crude oil. It owned an oil refinery. It employed teams of commodity traders who bought and sold a wildly diverse menu of raw materials and financial products, from gasoline to paper futures contracts. This might have encouraged most CEOs to take their company public. Koch Industries, however, did not want outsiders to know how much money its traders were earning. Taking the company public would expose too many of its secrets. The memo said, certain of Koch's commodity traders are particularly worried that their high salaries, once disclosed to the public, would be used against them by their trading partners. Secrecy was a strategic necessity for Koch Industries. Charles Koch did not want to surrender it. He also didn't want to surrender control. He had a specific, clear vision of how to run his company, and he didn't need Wall Street investors to interfere. If the bankers expected Charles Koch to go along with the conventional wisdom of their time, then they, like so many outsiders, did not understand him. Beneath his low-key veneer, Charles Koch was, at his core, a fighter. He had unmovable ideas about how things should be, and he did not back down when challenged. When he was challenged by his own brothers for control of Koch Industries, he fought them in a bitter legal battle that lasted decades. When he was challenged by members of a powerful labor union during his first years as CEO, he fought them even as they committed an act of industrial sabotage that nearly destroyed Koch's oil refinery. When the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Koch Industries' oil gathering business, Charles Koch fought them with every legal and political tool at his disposal. When a liberal Congress and President Barack Obama sought to impose regulations on the fossil fuel industry to control greenhouse gas emissions, Charles Koch fought them in ways that changed U.S. politics. In each of these fights, Charles Koch prevailed. When Charles Koch dismissed the bankers in 1981, it was just a small skirmish in the larger war to control Koch Industries. After prevailing in that fight, he created a company that was true to his vision. He avoided the snares that entangled many publicly traded companies that report their financial results to investors every 3 months. Koch Industries didn't have to think quarter to quarter. The company thinks year to year. An internal think tank and deal-making committee called the Development Group will sometimes think through a business deal on a timeline measured in decades. This long-term view made Koch more nimble where other companies stumbled. In 2003, for example, Koch Industries bought a group of money-losing fertilizer plants when no publicly traded company was willing to take the risk. Today, those plants are as profitable as a broken ATM machine that spews out cash around the clock. Unlike publicly traded companies, Koch Industries does not pay out rich dividends to investors. Charles Koch insists on reinvesting at least 90% of the company's profits, fueling its constant expansion. This strategy laid the foundation for decades of continuous growth. Koch Industries expanded continuously by purchasing other companies and branching out into new industries. It specialized in the kind of businesses that are indispensable to modern civilization, but which most consumers never directly encounter. The company is embedded in the hidden infrastructure of everyday life. Millions of people use Koch's products without ever seeing Koch's name attached. Koch refines and distributes fossil fuels, from gasoline to jet fuel, on which the global economy is dependent. Koch is the world's third largest producer of nitrogen fertilizer, which is the cornerstone of our modern food system. Koch makes the synthetic materials used in baby diapers, waistbands, and carpets. It makes the chemicals used for plastic bottles and pipes. It owns Georgia Pacific, which makes the wall panels, beams, and plywood required to build homes and office buildings. It makes napkins, paper towels, stationery, newspaper, and personal hygiene products. Koch Industries owns a network of commodities trading offices in Houston, Moscow, Geneva, and elsewhere, which are the circulatory system of modern finance. The book, Kochland, by Christopher Leonard.
Share the Thom Hartmann program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. Did you know that the ancient Roman Republic, which for 480 years was actually a democratic republic before Julius Caesar kind of ended the democracy phase and replaced it with the autocracy phase, that they were brought down by a very small group of very rich people. The richest man in ancient Rome was Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was the richest guy, the billionaire of Rome. And he frankly hated the Roman free bread for all welfare system. It was being paid for with his tax dollars, after all. So him and Pompey the Great and a few other rich guys got together, and they basically crashed Rome. They turned it into an oligarchy and then into a tyranny. And the parallels to what Trump is doing right now are absolutely shocking. There's an article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled "American Caesar: Trump's Path to Power Mirrors Rome's Darkest Days." Check it out.
Use the promo codes. I was thinking we could have for the holidays, we should buy this stuff. This is good holiday stuff we can be doing for people. Okay, we'll talk more about that later. Let's go to Susan. Is it Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania? Schuylkill County? Susan? Susan won't answer if I don't give the correct pronunciation of the county. Susan, we'll try to come back to you if we can. Mary, Seattle, go ahead.
Hi, Jefferson. Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks for calling.
I wanted to make 2 observations today. Number one, I think people saying the Democrats didn't continue to fight and fold it, that is so wrong. They were fighting for health care, jobs, and just to save America, really, because I think we have a poison in this country that's flooding through it. It's destroying us. And right now, the only antidote that we have to that poison is the Democratic Party. I mean, I'm looking out here. I don't see anybody else trying to help us. So you might not have what you want, but if you are fighting, you got to help whatever weapon or whatever antidote you have. And sometimes antidotes don't taste good. Who wants medicine sometimes? But if you don't take it, what happens? We've got to get the Republican Party out. They are destroying America, and some of us know that. I think some of the former Republican voters are realizing that because it's hurting them in the pocket, and you can't tell me that you're coming here to help America when you're destroying the farmers, the workers, the schools. Everything we could even think is being destroyed. How did they get to take everything from us that we've had? Couldn't even go enjoy your government. Or I wanted to go and visit the White House one day. But with the shutdown, none of that was possible. So the Democrats did the most humane thing. Some people will fight. They will actually destroy people and human beings and throw them in your path to keep you from pursuing them. So the Republicans threw the babies out. They don't have food. They don't have formula. Through the old, the sick. Do you know there are disabled people that can't see, hear, walk, or talk? Now, how are they going to advocate and say, hey, I need my food stamps? And even if they work, they're not going to make the money some of us would make. So these things were important. And so the Democrats said, we're not going to fight by catching a kid by the leg and beating you with a kid. Yeah. That's what the Republicans don't have any morals. They used old people and everything to hurt the Democrats and to hurt us. They're hurting America. How are we going to get this poison out? Number two, how could women, especially, because when I saw Republican women getting elected, I really said, I think there's hope for that party. They're going in with it. When they see Trump, did you see the latest picture of him with those 2 little girls? I'm serious. Those kids look like 11, and he's hugging them. And one of those girls, if you look in her face, the one kind of behind him, she looked totally distressed. If you, Jefferson, got caught in a picture with 2 little 11, 12-year-old girls, and you're running for office saying, I'm a Christian, do you think anybody would trust you? How did this happen? And the Republican women who know about rape, who know how women have been abused since probably the beginning of time, and how they're now taking their jobs and everything, they have the nerve to go and vote. But we know, like some of the Mormons that were in those cults, those women taught those little 10, 11-year-old girls how to have sex with 40, 50, 60-year-old men, and they held them down so the men could rape them. And I'm challenging the Republican women to say, how could you, as a female, as a woman, as a protector of children, hold down children like this so these morbid men could rape them and cover that up? So the guy that said yesterday about the GOP, good old pedophiles, they're good old pedophile protectors. So it's the GOPP, good old pedophile protectors.
And you're not down with GOPP?
Yeah, are you with GOPP? And if you are,
you know me. Come on.
You are the lowest form of human being. And right now, I'm not seeing the whole party is, because there are some Republicans, they want those files released because they think it's evil and horrible. And not only Trump implicated in raping children, did they just have a guy from the Carolinas, a Republican leader, got caught?
No, you make a good point, Mary.
You're
on one, and you got
Republican women. Hey, so much for the sisterhood so much from women and their delicacy
and
how to protect women.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary. Thank you to the listeners at KBCS, and thank you to our friends in Seattle and surrounding areas. Appreciate it. And Mary, I also want to give a shout out to our callers yesterday. It impacted me emotionally that the folks in the team here saw that that after yesterday's show, I just sat in this chair and wept. And because we had so many people women call in and willing to share their own story. And actually a dad who called in and shared a story with about his own family. His daughter, I believe it was, who was victimized. And it was women talking about their own stories and some talking about stories of their own, of family members of theirs, daughters of theirs. And that's, we do a show and then we do another show, we do a topic, do another topic, and anything goes Friday, lots of topics almost at once. But for anybody who's listened yesterday, know that landed with a bunch of people, and one of the people it landed with was me. Let's go to Charles from Portland, Oregon. Go ahead, Charles.
Hello, Jefferson. Greetings from War Rapids, Portland, down here in the trenches.
Hey, man, good to hear your voice.
Hey, let me take you off speaker here. Yeah, a little bit better connection.
You go ahead.
Hey, I'm horrified about what's going to happen if, and please God, when MAGA collapses, because there's still going to be all the crimes, the actual crimes that have been committed at every level up and down by the GOPP. Not just the Epstein stuff, but on every level. And when the Dems get in and they're looking at this rubble and what to do after, there's no choice but to have prosecutions for some of the things that go on, and immediately that's going to be seen as, oh, look, the Dems are in power, and now it's their witch hunt. Look at that. They're going after everybody in the GOP. Well, it's because everybody in the damn GOP committed crimes. But, I'm sorry, let me not yell on the phone. I think there's going to have to be a Truth and Reconciliation Committee, some type of thing where people can come to the bar of justice and say, look, I committed these crimes. Here's all the evidence. Here's everything. And okay, I don't want to let people go for that, but if you're trying to say, here's the crimes that were committed into this, there's going to have to be some sort of thing where they can come forward, admit what they did, and have some leniency or amnesty. And then if you don't come forward and admit what you did, then you're fair game for investigations and prosecutions. But there has to be something to assuage this wound, this rape that we've endured for decades now. And I don't see how we're going to do it in, just business as usual sense.
That's interesting, Charles. And Charles, thank you so much for the call. It really is good to hear your voice, Charles, a friend of mine.
And you too.
Yeah. And I'll respond quickly by saying two things. So I want to get to folks' calls, but I want to say two things. One, thinking about a process after blank. It's a good question. After what is useful? Because as I was sort of saying yesterday, I believe two things. One, I believe that this perniciousness has to be defeated. And the other is I think our country has to figure out how to govern together. I think both those things are true. We have to fight hard and we have to find ways to work together. And that's a challenge to democracy. And I believe both things. And there have been movements that have popped up. I believe only that one thing. Right wing believes all that needs to happen is just destroy one's political enemy. And that has been too effective. But has it been too effective using from some out-of-bounds tools? And I don't just mean secret money, and I don't just mean AI algorithms and social media algorithms. I also mean straight-up corruption. And we have to come to grips with that. But the other thing I want to say is, the first thing is, before any truth and reconciliation, democracy has to win. MAGA has to lose. Before what happens next, we have to figure out how that's going to happen. I'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Stay with us. Smart people on the line. We'll talk to them. Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Show. Your show. I'm Jeff. Ash from Newport, Oregon. You're on the air.
Hi, Jeff. It's good to talk to you. You can hear me, right?
I can, yeah.
Okay.
Turn off your radio, though, because I think I hear us twice.
Nope, radio's off.
Weird. All right, go ahead.
Okay. Let me try turning off speaker. Is that any better?
Keep going.
Okay. So I just, God, sorry, I'm social anxiety here.
We'll both take a breath. We'll be fine.
Yeah. Real quick icebreaker, I guess. It's always good to listen to you. It's like somebody said before, you speak my language, the Trobriand's Graveyard and the Kobayashi Maru, all of that. Ice. Let's talk about ice. So Newport, where I live, is a small town. We've got like 10,000 people. And people are so focused on, Portland and Chicago and LA and all of that, that I think the small towns kind of get lost in it. And we just got reports here that ICE is wanting to build a facility in our neighborhood.
I just saw that. Yeah, tell people about it. Tell people, first of all, so Newport, Oregon is on the coast of the state. Give people a basic rundown of the place. It's a pretty small place. And yet, I just saw this news about ICE wanting to put a facility out there. Keep going, Ash.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful town. And because it is on the coast, we've got a Coast Guard station, which, back 20 years ago was moved from the Department of Transportation to Department of Homeland Security. And so since DHS has property here, what they've done is they've taken our rescue helicopter, moved it to like an hour and a half away, so we have nobody, here to do the rescue. And they want to use some of that land to build a detention center. And what do you think? Has there been any analysis yet on why Newport? And just imagine, for all those folks, and I learned the word Youper, and when you learn to use a new word, you say it all the time. So I think about the Youpers every day now for the last week. But think about all our smaller town listeners and all of our smaller town viewers. Imagine if they decided to put an ICE detention facility in your backyard, right, near your main street. Was there any explanation as to why Newport? Well, the thing is that there's not even an official, nothing official from the government.
Yep.
It's only come, we only know about it because people have been posting job listings, and because the helicopter was moved, things like that. It's all very kind of circumstantial, but and all of our local officials have requested information, from our city council all the way up to Senator Wyden. But some people think it might be because, number one, they've already got property here. Number two, it's out of the way.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of news coverage.
Yeah.
And number three, we are at the intersection of two major highways, so there'd be easy transportation.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't thought about the highway piece. I thought about the sort of quietness piece. But this is the thing, like what Trump has wanted to do with ICE and what Fox News has wanted to do with ICE and what their network propaganda set of machines has wanted to do with ICE is like use it as ways to go after democratically led cities, right? Go after places like Los Angeles and Portland and say, oh, look at there, and then take a little video of a 1 block radius from several years ago and say, look at this, our last caller, war-ravaged Portland. But places like Newport, everywhere is going to be impacted, everywhere, including places like Newport. Ash, thank you so much for calling.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us.
And we are back. Let us go straight to Linda from Jacksonville, Florida. You're on the air.
Oh, hi, Jefferson. I was in Jacksonville once when I called, but
well, now you're there forever. According to our systems, you must be there permanently.
No, the last time I called, had just gone to the No Kings protest in Salt Lake City because I'm a nomad. I'm a traveler, and I'm in Arizona, part of the winter. And
so we need to change your profile. I do not know the technology, what it takes to change your profile, but it sounds like, Linda, we need to change your profile to Everywhere USA.
Yes, I think that's more appropriate.
All right. Linda from Everywhere USA, you are on the air. It has now been changed to Everywhere USA. It just showed up on my computer. Thank you very much. All right, we have solved it. Go ahead, Linda.
This is, everything goes, anything goes on Friday.
Yeah.
So what I want to have help with is, we know that there are those people out there that believe they have the right and authority to declare that women have to carry this baby's body inside their body, no matter what. Mm-hmm. No matter what the circumstances. Mm-hmm. I mean, that they even think they have that right, no matter what anyway.
Yeah.
And what I am looking for, and cannot find anybody with an answer, is there must be an example of equivalency that could be required of men to bring this example forward. Mm-hmm. That in order to bring this point to view the thought and conversation and whatever. I mean, there must be something so men and other women could understand that you don't have the right to do that to someone else's body, to demand anything about it. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking for, if you have listeners or yourself that have any ideas on that. I think it's needed in this society.
I appreciate the call, Linda. And yeah, I'm sure there will be thoughts, and I'm sure people are already having them, and maybe some will call in. And Linda, thank you for calling in. I appreciate it. All right, you be well. Thanks. Let's go to Carol from Cave Junction, Oregon. Go ahead, Carol.
Hi. Someone talked earlier about greed.
Yeah.
And I've had this saying I've told my friends for decades, and I say, if we get rid of all the greedy people in the world, there'll only be 7 of us left.
Yeah.
And then what happens then is everybody gets real quiet because they're all deciding, are they one of the greedy ones or what? I've had my moments of greed, but I don't live
all of us have. No,
but much of the people in the top government live by it.
Yeah,
especially the number one person up there, whose name I don't like to say. That person operates only on greed, and that's it.
And greed and ambition, which is different, and competitiveness, which is also different. All of those can be useful, and all of those exist within us. And I am not sitting in the chair of the monkey throwing stones at the sinners for being lesser or worse. That is not how I sort of see the world. I just think those things have limitations as the primary drivers, primary decision values of our country, of a government, of how we get along together. That if the worst parts of me were all in charge, that ain't good for anybody. I don't even think it'd be good for me. So I think that's true of all of us, right? We come together to be a little bit better, to be a more perfect union. Not to be a perfect union, but a more perfect union. So I agree, Carol. If we got rid of every greedy person, I don't know what the number would be, but your 7 is as good a guess as mine.
Thank you.
Be well.
Oh, and I'd also like to make one comment is I'm also a Me Too. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Carol. All right. A word to the wise is efficient. I hear you loud and clear. James from Clear Lake Oaks, California. You're up.
Yes, I'd like to talk about the Truth and Reconciliation idea.
Yep.
So if we tried to do that, first of all, it's going to be next year, actually in 2027, before the Democrats could take back the House and maybe the Senate. And then if they set up this commission, that's going to take quite a while to get that going. And then you have to wait for the people to consent to go to the Truth and Reconciliation hearing. And then you got to wait for all of them that are going to go before you can start prosecuting the other ones.
Yeah.
By all the time that's passed, the statute of limitations is going to be passed for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And this stuff goes back way before Trump.
Yeah, no, the timeline, it's really interesting, James. The timeline challenge, right? Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa was its own thing, and not only there, but after legitimate civil war, like who's to say legitimate? After an honest to goodness, after a genuine, that's what I was looking for, after a genuine civil war, then there's both the time and the need. What I think Charles' point, which is a good one, is, to me, I heard a question. He had an idea, but what I heard was a question. My question is, how are we going to get to the bottom of this stuff? How are we going to get to a place of truth? And how are we going to get to a place of reconciliation? I think those are really interesting questions. And your point about, and how do we do that in a time frame that makes sense? You got any ideas, James?
No, I don't. That's why I wanted to say that. Yeah. I don't think it's going to work because a lot of the people are going to escape by the statute of limitations.
Yeah. And so others would say, and so here's what I would say. Maybe this is kind of obvious. Prosecutions for things that should be prosecuted, not merely for political disagreement. I don't think it's very important. And you're not saying this, Charles. Nobody's saying this. Nobody wants prosecutions for political disagreement, but yes, prosecutions for things that should be prosecuted, and that should happen within a statute of limitations. So that's what I'd say about that. James, thank you so much for your call and for your truth.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Guns for Hire, how the CIA and U.S. Army recruit mercenaries for white Rhodesia. It's a historical reprint of what appears to be a 1979 pamphlet, basically. This is from the introduction. It does have an ISBN number. It is available in book sources. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, actually this must have been published post-1980 because they're referencing Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, 270,000 white settlers, mostly immigrated since World War II, controlled the government and economy, ruling over the 7 million black Africans. The Zimbabweans cannot vote. They have been forced off the bulk of the arable land, and they have no democratic rights whatsoever. All labor performance in Zimbabwe is black labor, and it is intensely exploited, often at less than subsistence wages. Zimbabweans have been fighting European invaders since the early 17th century. Since the 1890s, they have been directly ruled by Europeans, at first in the form of a private British corporation, the British South Africa Company. Since 1923, direct political rule has been in the hands of the white settlers, currently led by Ian Smith and his fascist Rhodesian Front Party. It's important to note that the white settlers were originally given this direct local power as a, quote, self-governing colony of the British government, thereby creating a master-caretaker relationship. During these past 80-odd years, Western imperialism, the multinational corporations of the United States, Britain, and South Africa, has extracted huge profits from the exploited and oppressed Zimbabwean population via the subsidiaries of the Anglo-Americans, Lonrho, AMAX, Union Carbide, Mobil, ITT, and other corporations. They fully intend to continue doing so as long as they can. The white settler minority has been rewarded for their violent subjugation of the Zimbabwean people with perhaps the highest national standard of living in the world. Sir Roy Walensky, the former Prime Minister of the Central African Federation, which included what is now Rhodesia, once said, "This man Smith has an appeal. It's the appeal of an easy life. For $6,000 a year, you can have 5 servants, a swimming pool, and a lot." Beginning during the early 1960s, however, the Zimbabwean nationalist forces under the leadership of the Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, evolved the strategy of guerrilla war to liberate their people and land. It is proving to be very successful. There are 20,000 guerrillas in base camps in Tanzania and Mozambique, over 3,000 in Zimbabwe itself, and this number is continually rising. In a meeting between Stephen Solars, a U.S. congressman, and the ZANU guerrilla leaders, they were reported to reject the possibility of enlisting the assistance of Cuban or other foreign troops, declaring that if we cannot liberate ourselves, we do not deserve to be liberated. Despite Western propaganda to the effect that the U.S. and British only wish to avoid a bloodshed in Rhodesia, don't forget the Zimbabweans have been bleeding for almost a century, their real fear is that the liberation struggle will win. With this victory in sight, it is not surprising that the counterattack by the Smith regime has become more vicious and brutal. Actually, this must have been published pre-1980, because this is when Smith was still in power in Rhodesia. More than 250,000 rural Zimbabweans have been forced into concentration camps. Terrorist raids have been conducted against Zimbabwean refugees in Mozambique. Dusk to dawn shoot-on-sight curfews have been instituted and enforced in the border areas. And escalating counterinsurgency attacks have been launched against the military arm of the liberation struggle, the Zimbabwean People's Army, ZIPA. It is crucial for Westerners to understand that the Smith regime has not stood alone in this barbaric campaign. This pamphlet documents the critically important element in U.S. imperialism's support for the Smith regime, white mercenary reinforcements for the fascist Rhodesian, quote, security forces. This flow of U.S. mercenaries to prop up white Rhodesia is an important, though secret, part of U.S. imperialism's strategy for Africa. The U.S. has massive investments in southern Africa. Zimbabwe alone supplies the bulk of high-grade chrome ore used in the U.S. for jet engines and other advanced technological items. Coal, copper, and other minerals are ripped out of Zimbabwe for U.S. industry. Mobil Oil, Texaco, Hertz Rent-A-Cars, Holiday Inns, and many other U.S. corporations operate illegally in Rhodesia through foreign subsidiaries. More important still is South Africa, the fortress of U.S. interests in Africa, where $1.5 billion is invested by GM, IBM, Ford, and other giant multinational corporations. The liberation of Zimbabwe would, for the first time, penetrate the buffer zone of satellite countries protecting the borders of South Africa. South African guerrilla fighters, who are already training by the thousands in camps in Tanzania and Zambia, would have direct access to re-enter their land and accelerate the liberation struggle. Knowing that the stakes are high, U.S. imperialism has worked to strengthen the white supremacist outposts in Africa, although at times this had to be done covertly. In 1970, the Nixon White House approved Henry Kissinger's Operation Tar Baby strategy, based on Option 2 of the Secret National Security Study Memorandum No. 39. This strategy essentially called for covert military assistance, including direct exchanges, so that South African troops could be trained in the U.S. in specialized tactics and weapons. This would be done while the U.S. tried to convince Africans that it was on their side. This is from the pamphlet number 39, that Kissinger memorandum. We would maintain public opposition to racial oppression, but relax political isolation and economic restrictions without openly taking a position undermining the United Kingdom and the UN on Rhodesia. We would be more flexible in our attitudes toward the Smith regime. And it goes on from there. Guns for hire.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We are back. Yesterday I said I wanted to get to something. I didn't get to it. So I wanted to say something about Michael Savage and political parties and talk radio and different strategies of approaching pro-democracy or politics in general. I'm going to offer two strategies that I've seen a lot of times, and I want to propose a third. One strategy is, let's call it the Lieberman strategy. Let's call it the Mike Schaffler strategy. You might not have heard of him before. And this is legislatively valid. I'm not saying morally valid, I'm saying progressively valid, but arithmetically valid. That if you have a legislative chamber, call it a Senate of 100 people, call it a state house of 60 people, and therefore you need 31 votes to get most things done. Those votes between 25 and 35, those votes that are harder to count, those votes that might go either way, end up having lots of power. When Lieberman said center, when Paul Wellstone said center out, he meant the center of people's lives. When Joe Lieberman meant center out, he meant whatever that 31st vote wants. And if I can position myself to be that 31st vote versus that 30th versus that 29th vote in a 60-person chamber, or that 49th vote or a 50th vote or 51st vote in a U.S. Senate chamber, a little bit different dynamic because of the filibuster, it's been watered down, by the way, then that center group can in fact be the leadership group. Not the group's official leadership, but they can go make deals to, shut down a shutdown, for example. That's one strategy that we see a lot and hear about a lot. Let me offer a second strategy that we see, and that is, let us think of the further end of, if it's a spectrum, and I try to, in my own mind, rage against the idea that politics is a spectrum because I think it's false. I think it's a human construct. I don't think that's how it is. But when we end up counting votes in a legislative chamber, it very often resembles that. We count votes even when it comes to an election of a person. It resembles a little bit that. And I understand why that idea, albeit a self-fulfilling prophecy, ends up fulfilling a little bit. That we will advocate for the purity of our cause and go after those who don't have that degree of purity and go really after enemies. And I will use an example of Michael Savage. So Michael Savage was different than legislative strategy, media strategy. I would listen to him and just be horrified. And Tom was talking about it and said, that guy's really gifted and he's a really talented guy. He was not agreeing with his politics, to be very, very clear. And he would talk about how you'd tell a story and tell a story within the story and a story within the story, and it showed what a radio expert he was. But he would just be blistering, be the kind of thing that I realized, man, if I saw that guy on the street, I would just assume he hated me. That if I were on the street bleeding, he would step over me or cut me again. That he was opposed to things that I thought were really important and also opposed to me. But if you can get your enemies scared enough or weak enough or marginalized enough, then you can do that kind of rhetorical politics or politics in general. And if you can get other people scared of being lumped in with those folks, you can bring people in to your your angry core team. And you're never really, if you're Michael Savage, you were never really aiming for 51% of the people. What he knew as a radio strategist, I'm not a radio strategist, I should probably be better at that. But he knew as a radio strategist, he didn't need 51% of the people. He didn't need to govern. Rush Limbaugh said this, is that I am not judged by the result of elections, I'm judged by the number of listeners I get. And if you get like 10% of people listening to you, that's a lot. And so he'd go after that core, hard core, not just of values or purity, but of anger, of venality, of how much they were united in their hatred of their political adversary. And that's another strategy. Maybe that's strategy 2 and strategy 2.1 or 2.5, or maybe even 2 and 3, but I'm calling it a second. It's like, here is the core of the virtuous, or the core of the most angry, the core of the you name it, and then try to have that radiate out a little bit, but some of what you're trying to just do is sell books. And maybe scare some other people, or at least unite some of your own people. Maybe even do, and Donald Trump is sort of an example of that second strategy, where he said, all right, here's the deal. I might not be your kind of guy. I might not believe in your God. I've never read that Bible, but I will pretend to have done that. And you will be willing to believe that, to go along with that pretending, because I hate your enemy as much as you do, and I will help you hate them and help you beat them. And because of that, you don't care who I sexually assaulted. You don't care my personal moral values. You don't care about my corruption. You don't care about me tearing down the East Wing of the White House. You don't care about my relationships with pedophiles, because I hate your enemy as much as you hate your enemy. That's another strategy. I want to offer a third one. Because I don't really like either of those strategies very much. The first one, they both feel morally bankrupt. They also feel like they have long-term negative implications. That first strategy, because if all you're doing is just sticking your finger in the wind and figuring out where the middle is, that middle can continue to move, and it moves you along. And your beliefs, and your, even just thinking strategically, your rhetorical architecture has to continue to change. Your values have to continue to change if you had them in the first place. It can be dizzying. I have talked to multiple people. I remember the guy who was member of Congress in Oregon, who told the same story as a state senator, just slightly different. He said, and it was Congressman Weaver, and he said, when I was elected, I was elected as a liberal Democrat. He ended up running as a Green Party member for Secretary of State. He said, political spectrum has moved. I haven't changed. I still think what I think before, but I can't find a coalition that, that has the center of power that agrees with me. I think he fits in. I think Weaver, even then, fit in with a lot of more Democrats than he gave some credit for, but too little of the leadership as he saw it. Another guy was a guy named Cliff Trow. Cliff Trow was elected. It is him telling me. I wasn't asking him about it. He just told me about it. He said, Jeff, when I was elected to the state Senate, and he was a college professor, as I recall, and wonderful, wonderful guy. I was elected as a moderate. People saw me as maybe a crossover vote. I was elected as a moderate. By the time I retired, I was viewed as one of the most liberal members of the state Senate. He said, Jeff, not only my values didn't change, my positions didn't change, my politics didn't change. Just, I was a stick on the beach, and the water level changed. The tide shifted. They were successful in shifting that tide. And that first strategy, that Lieberman strategy, just moves with the tide and invites other people to move that tide. Second strategy I don't like, but the second strategy at least can move the tide. At least it can stay in the sand. At least it can be firm, maybe persuade others. It's at least not mealy-mouthed. The reason I don't like that one is not just because it's mean, but because its long-term implications are, how do we actually govern in a country? Not just trying to get like Trump's thing of like, here's how you get like 45% of support from the people, but with voter suppression and with scaring other folks about their enemy and maybe getting a third-party candidate or two, then maybe I can eke out a victory. And even those moderates will stay with me because I'll threaten them in primaries and with enough media support. And like, yeah, I get that. And it's allowed him to be elected president. But what's the long-term implications? The long-term implications, you got people already saying, what would a Truth and Reconciliation Commission look like? So after this break, I want to offer a third strategy, a third approach that I'm working on.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll also have your calls after this. It's Anything Goes Friday. What's going right now is some stuff that's been bubbling up all week. Valerie from Morton Grove, Illinois, you are on the air.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for all that you're doing. I I'll be quick. Recently, many people have been praising Marjorie Taylor Greene and holding her up as some great, decent, progressive person, and I don't think that she is. She's been correct on two issues, on the Epstein issue and health care.
Mm-hmm.
A caller to this program even suggested twice that she should be speaker. Now, I think Mike Johnson is despicable, but I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene is any better. They're both horrible.
I appreciate it, Valerie. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, think of the position on gun control that she has had, and all the awful things that she's said and done. And I believe in grace, but I also believe that a leopard doesn't change its spots. Mm-hmm. And I just think of how she harassed David Hogg, a survivor of the Stone Douglas shooting. Mm-hmm. So I somehow think that she's pulling the wool over people's eyes, and I really don't trust her. And also, Trump's current wife is in many of the Epstein videos and photos that we see on TV, and I wonder why no one is asking about that.
I missed that. Say again, why nobody's asking about what?
I said that wife number 3, Trump's wife number 3, is in many of the Epstein videos and photos that we see on TV. And I just wonder why nobody's asking any questions about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you, Valerie, and I'll respond to the first thing. What I heard you say was that Marjorie Taylor Greene, yes, she signed the discharge petition, but don't get that confused with saying that she ought to be Speaker of the House. And we have had callers say, oh yeah, maybe we can get a few people to break ranks of Republicans and form a coalition government with some of those people that could change the House. My own guess, I don't need to opine on that too much, but given that anything goes Friday, yeah, I think that's hugely unlikely, and I don't think Tom Massey wants to be Speaker of a Democratic caucus, and I certainly don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene would do that, and I don't think that Hakeem Jeffries would want that. I don't think there are 100, much less 200 Democrats who would want that. So I don't think, but I get your point. The other thing I would say, what my dad might have to say about this is he says, in politics, there's no friends and enemies. There are allies and adversaries. And sometimes you have unlikely allies. So let us think in those terms. But otherwise, I agree. I don't think anybody in this program is pushing for statues to Marjorie Taylor Greene. But I do think it is also okay to praise people when they are right about the thing that they are right about the courage it might take to break ranks with your own power coalition in order to find something that is true. I think that is what a profile in courage is. And I think it's possible to do that without endorsing the entirety of the political platform, the entirety of their worldview, or wanting to elect them President of the United States. And that's, of course, not what you were saying, but those are my quick responses. Let's go to Michael from Anchorage. Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, I have a couple of points I'd like to make, Jefferson. Thank you very much for taking my call. I've been meaning to try to stay on the line for a while. Anyway, if anyone still reads
stick with us
out there,
stick with us. I'm gonna bring you right after the music. Sorry about that.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com.
So after the horrific school shooting in Tennessee, leaving 3 9-year-olds dead, as well as three adults, the Tennessee legislature has taken 2 very interesting steps. The first is they're moving to shield gun manufacturers and sellers from liability lawsuits. But even more interesting, the legislature has just passed a bill that sets up a statewide system where you can turn in teachers for teaching things that make children feel bad about themselves, specifically teaching white children that white people once enslaved black people. Seriously. or teaching that, about the Holocaust, for example, that, white people in Germany killed Jews. This is apparently going to be not just outlawed in Tennessee, but there's a whole apparatus being set up right now so that you can turn in your neighbors. It's just, there's a whole long rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
And we are back. Third approach. I'll talk more about it next week so I can get to your calls. Third approach. Imagine a pro-democracy coalition that included independents, included, and to some degree at the center, Democrats, included people who grew up Republicans or sometimes Republicans, but who believe in democracy, believe in a middle class, believe in science, have some shared core beliefs that we've got to get along. Imagine hardcore lefties, maybe even harder core than Mamdani. Imagine if you had those people, a coalition of people of goodwill. And those people were willing to at least figure out a few things. It's not a brand new political party. It's not everything. But imagine if that could be some basis of a community. I'm not saying everybody. If you're a fascist, you're probably not invited to the little party. I don't mean political party. I mean like you don't get tea and crumpets. Okay, you don't get to invited to the reindeer games. If you're a racist and not apologizing for that and trying to get better, if you're a misogynist and not trying to get better, and I say that because I'm not throwing stones, I'm trying to get better myself. Like, you don't need to have tea and crumpets. You don't have to play with the reindeer games. You can have your own little fascist party, your own little racist party. You got some rich and powerful people doing podcasts all the time on your behalf. You got a president you might even really like right now. So I'm not saying those folks. But I am saying let's call it 60% of the American people, people of goodwill. What would it look like to have a movement that was responsible to those people? What would it look like to build a movement that was useful to those people? What would it be like to have a set of communications that was palatable for those people? And there should and would be meaningful disagreements on policy. But what would that look like? I am dancing with that third approach. I'm just toying with it. And because I'm kind of sick of the other two. I'm kind of sick of just finding the middle and then letting the right wing, you use your own epithet, drive that middle to wherever it goes. And I'm also a little bit sick I'm more than a little bit sick about the politics of us good and them evil and terrible and horrible and should be destroyed, when in fact, what they're talking about that being evil is the virtuous stuff. That having hatred and anger being the basis of a politics, I'm kind of sick of that. I want compassion to be a little more of our basis. Greed exists, but it shouldn't be the basis of our politics. It should be the basis of our community. So I want to just think about a third approach. It's very different. It's not like third way politics. That's, by the way, strategy one. It is when we think of media, when we think of community, we think of organizing. I think it is just a little bit different. All right, let's go to your calls. Let's go to Jeff from Portland, Oregon. Go ahead.
Hey, happy Anything Goes Friday, Jefferson. Heck of a show today. Lots of passion-filled calls, which is appropriate for the times, Trump 2.0. He's put on steroids the cruelty, corruption, and chaos of his first catastrophic term. And, to Larry from LA's point, Trump and the Republicans, they're once again eviscerating the economy, the environment, clean energy development, the rule of law, et cetera. But, of course, health care, the issue that Democrats took a stand on over the shutdown. So, like many progressives, I, too, was disappointed that we didn't get any relief for the millions who are going to possibly lose their health care now. But it's also worth noting that 42 million people were going to go lose their food benefits this month if the shutdown continued. And, Jeff, I think you said you're friends with Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, the representative.
Friends would be too strong. Friends would be too strong. But I've spoken with her before, a couple times.
Okay, and she pointed out the SNAP benefits is why she voted yes for the CR in the House. Yeah. But she also tried to play the both sides game by saying that her fellow Democrats were just political messaging as opposed to the reality of what they were doing, trying to save people's health care, 20 million people's health care. So, in my opinion, Jeff, it's Democrats like her that deserve to be primaried by progressives. And fortunately, that's what groups like the Sunrise Movement and David Hogg's Leaders We Deserve are trying to do next year, or planning to do next year. And, in my opinion, that's where our focus and support should go to build a stronger Democratic Party and to provide a bulwark for American democracy as we know it. Your thoughts, and have you ever talked to David Hogg? I think, you guys
I never have talked to David Hogg. I once DM'd him. I once sent him a little note, didn't hear back, but I would love to talk to him. I will give thoughts, but I want to get to more calls because I just went on a little bit of a rant, and so I want to hear from Michael. But Jeff, thank you. You're always so, it's patronizing to say you're so well spoken, but I mean that as a genuine compliment. And you advocate for your position strongly. Michael from Anchorage, you are back on the air.
Thank you, sir. Yes, just 2 points. A really good book about the creature from Jekyll Island, and it's about the creation of the Fed, and it goes into detail about how that legislation was passed in the middle of the night, and the comments of those who voted for it were, if they knew what we'd done, they would have strung us up. Then listen to Eisenhower's leaving office speech. The main point was the military-industrial complex.
Yep.
But it is morphed into the multinational military-industrial complexes, for lack of a better word. But I am confident that the Democrats will actually wake up one day, and maybe the Republicans too.
Thank you,
You're
Mike.
listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Appreciate you, Michael, bringing us to the break, and we'll be back with your calls and the big finish. Thank you.
Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Minority Leader, How to Lead from the Outside and Make Real Change by Stacey Abrams. This is from chapter 1, although the introduction is fascinating too, where she talks about, Rhodes scholarships and stuff, but this is chapter 1. I sit in the living room, a cozy space, warm in the early summer. I'm perched on the edge of a sofa next to Valerie, the home's owner, a lovely black woman in her late 40s. Across from us, seated close together on a wide settee met for one, are her 2 children, a son and a daughter. Politicians rarely visit their streets, which are nestled in a poorer community in South Georgia. Valerie beams with pride that both her children are headed to college in the fall. David, 17, plans to study criminology. Maya, 18, her belly round with her first child, intends to become a middle school teacher. Both newly graduated from high school, Maya will give birth in mere weeks and begin college months later, an unwed teen mother. Her intended school is more than 3 hours north of her home, so her mother will raise her newborn baby while she starts her freshman year. Valerie speaks matter-of-factly about the coming challenge, raising a new child just as hers leaves the nest. Still, she is determined that both her children pursue college degrees that she never received. Maya, the mother-to-be, wonders how she'll do so far away from home and her baby. Yet in the next breath, she explains how college will be the best for her and her child. Their future success rests upon her. I've come to their home as part of my campaign for governor, so I asked Valerie what she expects of someone like me. What can I do to help make lives like hers better? In her soft voice, she replies, she just wants options for financial aid for her children. They will succeed, she says, if they can afford to stay in school. As I look around the modest home passed down through the generations, I understand both the pride and the desperation tangled in her response. She got them through and has given them the tools to carve out better lives for themselves. We chat more about the worries she's lived with all those years, our discussion turning to the crime and poverty in their neighborhood. Then I ask Valerie what she wants. At first, all I get in response is a quizzical look to suggest I need to reconsider my bid for higher office. Or that suggests. I repeat, what do you want for you? What secret dream do you have for yourself? Her confused expression turns to one of surprise. I don't know, she tells me. I've been a cashier at the Piggly Wiggly for 20 years. You must want something, I probe, something you'd like to do for you? A daycare, she admits quietly. I'd like to start a daycare center for unwed mothers like my daughter, so more girls can finish school and pursue their dreams. But that ambition is beyond her. Her body language, her tone of voice, her averted gaze speak louder than her words. I press her, but she demurs with a smile. Let's just see what happens if you win the governor's job, she says. Valerie's house in South Georgia is not too different from the squat red brick house where I grew up on South Street in Gulfport, Mississippi. An oak tree grew out in our front yard, shadowing the front sidewalk, forbidding grass to grow beneath its shade. Pink azaleas bloomed each spring from bushes that flanked the front door. Our rented house and the other set close by teemed with children, all black, all working class. We played in our postage-stamped yards, make believing the fantastical, superhero exploits, cops and robbers. As we got older, we'd talk about moving to New Orleans or living in one of the mansions along the beachfront that lay less than 5 miles away, across the railroad tracks that ran in between our neighborhood and the more wealthy environs. We dreamed of more, while our parents' lives centered around survival and making it from paycheck to paycheck. Instinctively, we understood that more had to be possible, even if we didn't know what to do to get there. These imaginings, these desires, are the roots of ambition. As adults, like Valerie, we tend to edit our desires until they fit our construction of who we're supposed to become. In such a world, I wouldn't dare dream of running for higher office, for mayor or governor or president. At least for now, Valerie sees herself retiring in 20 more years from Piggly Wiggly as a cashier, rather than as a small business owner who helps the community raise its children. From our brief meeting, I could see she had the fire, albeit of a low burn, of a minority leader. She had ambition, she had vision, but she didn't have the faith, and understandably so. Whether we come from working class neighborhoods or grow up comfortably middle class, minorities rarely come of age explicitly thinking about what we want and how to get it. People already in power almost never have to think about whether they belong in the room, much less if they would be listened to once outside. These men, and they are usually men and typically white, do not have to grapple with low expectations based on gender or race or class. Ambition for them begins with reminiscences of old times and older friendships or newer alliances. The ends have already been decided. Only the means are to be discussed. Most potential minority leaders feel the same lack of faith Valerie had, at least at some point in their evolution. We may not know how to get the first job, let alone make it to the big chair. We don't know how to take the leap from accepting our fates to actually changing them, and not just a little, but radically. Then there are those who simply don't know what they want. The drive to achieve burns inside, often without a clear target. We want to be something, but what that is remains hazy. Often we cannot articulate our goals because they lie just beyond the reach of who we're supposed to be. Ambition's scale is irrelevant. What holds us back is not scope, it's fear. And because we don't know what to call our dreams, don't know how to make them happen, or are pretty sure we'll be disappointed, we just stand still. We become a minority, but becoming a minority leader demands that we embrace ambition as our due. Stacey Abrams.
go straight to your calls. Ron from Halleck, Minnesota. Go ahead.
I'd like to try to connect conversations from starting with Susie of a couple of days ago and yesterday. Mostly regarding definition, whether manly is, according to the dictionary, this certain list, or if it's things closer to what would have been or still is the Boy Scout law: trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, etc. And going forward, again with definitions and what's next, I think one of the most significant questions we could ask is what constitutes equal justice under the law. And that's why it's also important for the Epstein files, et cetera, because it puts a spotlight on exactly the fact that we haven't had equal justice under the law for generations. And I'd just like to hear your thoughts, Jeff.
Hear my thoughts, and we haven't had equal justice under the law for generations?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
or that's a conversation that absolutely would include a great many people of either party, no party, what have you.
Yeah, no.
It's just a simple question that isn't so simple.
Yeah, but I'm wanting to understand the question.
That how can that be included as a part of a conversation forward? How can definitionally that be added to, whether in a sense of litigation, whether it be someone that has only poverty in their life that happens to be litigated against by a state or a large corporation. With a public defender, don't they inherently not have equal justice or equal opportunity under the law because of the skills of the litigators that are involved?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if your basic case is things should be more equal and that things are insufficiently equal and they've never been really equal and we should work harder at that, the answer to all those questions is absolutely yes. And then if your other point is that is particularly and obviously manifest when it comes to getting legal recourse in the context of pretty expensive legal services, that is also true. So that's not those are hard issues, but not hard and complicated, but not hard to agree with in terms of acknowledging the problem. And I appreciate that. Let's go to Beachside.
But are they equally simple with encouraging conversations with those that may disagree on policy?
Yeah, and in fact, I think once we get to the level of what ought a little bit of shared morality look like, and if we passed policy from a sense of shared morality, once we start that conversation, I think you end up with a lot more agreement among people than those who watch the political food fight think. I think it's one of the reasons I'm a fan of civic assemblies. One of the reasons I'm a fan of sortition. One of the reasons I'm a fan of civic juries. Name basically three names for the same thing. Of people of goodwill getting together to make decisions is, I think, once you say, hey, what's the best thing we could do here? Once you've asked that question, not like, what do I already think, what do you already think, and where are the places of disagreement, how do we fight about that? That's not what I mean. But what's the best thing we can do here? What's happening here, and what's the best thing we can do here? I think there's a lot more agreement than most people think, but that's just me. I want to go to Jonathan from Bois, Idaho. I believe it's pronounced Bois. Jonathan?
Yes, Boise, Idaho.
I know how to pronounce it.
Okay.
I live in Oregon. Right. It's our next door neighbor. I just think it's funny to call it Bois, and I will always think it's funny. Are you there?
Your voice, yeah, I'm here, but your voice is cutting out.
Is it really? Well, that's not good. I'm going to let me put you on hold for a second. I'm going to try another caller. I'm going to ask if my voice is cutting out with them, and then we'll know it's our problem. Hold on just a second, Jonathan. Let's go to Ann from Seattle, Washington. You're on the air. Is my voice cutting out?
No, I'm hearing you just fine.
All right. Go ahead, Ann.
Just a comment about Truth and Reconciliation committees.
Yep.
One of the Eastern Mennonite University in Virginia had a Truth and Reconciliation program. It was called the Conflict Transformation Program.
Yep.
And we were actually trained by people who worked in South Africa.
Yep.
There is a whole network of restorative justice practitioners who would be available to build something like that. And if you build it the way they did in South Africa, through the church rather than through the political system, you could get it done almost immediately. And
Interesting.
I know it works because after 9/11, we held community restorative justice meetings in Hagerstown, Maryland, and there wasn't a single hate crime in this very red area of, lots of flaggots running around. During that time after 9/11. And I think,
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I think one of the key things would be to run it through the traditional peace churches, the Mennonite and things, to take it out of the political realm and give it a little bit more gravitas.
A little more moral weight, a little more trustworthiness.
Yeah. And, we're so, this whole political thing about co-opting the churches, there's some of the ones that haven't been co-opted. Yeah. And they're still speaking truth to power. And I think that would be, we could even start organizing it now.
No, and that's really interesting. And I have a question, but I want to say thank you and please to the people of faith who are working to actually live your values and to organize people around those values and principles. That one of the biggest ways our country started to lose its way was when the dominant religion of this country started getting dominated by those who wanted politics of domination, as distinct from politics of nurture or support or loving thy neighbor. And that one of the most important dynamics that's happened in this country in the last 50 years. And so thank you to people who work in those faith communities to make them actually live their values. But Ann, the question I wanted to ask was, what are the key preconditions for doing the sort of truth and reconciliation-y thing, and what building blocks have to be put in place? I know that's a big question, but what are a couple things before we go to break?
Well, first of all, you have to get the buy-in of the political system, and by taking it outside, Democratic or Republican hands, you would do that. Handing it off to the church would also give it some, some authority. But the biggest precondition is that there is an agreement that if you come forward, you will not be faced with, murder charges or whatever else. That it's the social ostracism of having admitted that is actually probably a stronger deterrent than almost anything else. And a lot of this work comes out of the First Nations. And it would also be a really great resource for setting up those types of restorative justice practices rather than, the retributive justice that we've all gotten to be so inculcated with.
Here's a thought that has occurred to me. If this country had the, you can call it technology, but if some of the lesson is coming from the First Nations, it's pretty old technology, of truth and reconciliation practices in the context of the aftermath of the Civil War.
Oh my gosh,
Do you think that American history following the Civil War might have been different?
It would have been completely different because so much of the dominance issues were the carpetbaggers going down south, the political games, as people were losing power, trying to regain it, the Jim Crow laws and things like that. And so that because it would have made those power plays visible, it would have made those offenders visible to the community. They lose a lot of their power because they work in secrecy. One of the things we've lost in the society is the difference between privacy and secrecy.
And thank you so much. I hadn't thought about that literally until your call. But I still feel so many of our politics are driven by that great schism and our inability to address it best. But anyway, thanks for the wisdom you offered. I appreciate it, Ann.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We got the smartest set of listeners in Radio Land. I appreciate you. Learn from you literally every single time I do this. We'll be back with your calls. Big Finish. Jonathan, you're back from Boise, not to be confused with Blois, which is like some place probably in France. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's a kind of French-sounding name. Anyway, I'm looking for the answer to a question, and that is, I've seen numerous newsreels of Chicago PD assisting the ICE fascists and Homeland, under the whole umbrella of the Homeland Security people, assisting them. Why is the mayor of Chicago permitting this, and also the governor?
It's a good question. My first answer is I don't know enough of the facts to opine very usefully, but that hasn't stopped me before, so I will offer some thoughts. As far as Governor Pritzker, he doesn't run the Chicago mayoralty, nor does he run the Chicago Police Department. So he's got an excuse. He could try to do something. He could certainly try to do something using soft power, but that's the answer there. I can't speak for the mayor. If I were going to make irresponsible guesses, they'd be these. What could I imagine somebody was doing who wasn't just asleep at the switch or wasn't just trying to do bad things? I could imagine a circumstance where a mayor or let's say a police chief or let's say some police officers were aware of actual genuine criminals, and instead of locking them up in American prisons, instead of trying to deal with immigration services on their own as local police department, they were to call up ICE and say, hey, we will work with you on actual genuine criminals. I could imagine that. And I could also imagine a worst case scenario than that. But otherwise, I'd be speculating. But I'm guessing, Jonathan, that much of the reason you asked the question was so you could make the point and elevate awareness of that. And I was not fully aware of that. And I appreciate you elevating the awareness. Thank you, Jonathan, very much. Let's go to Beachside Bill. You're on the air from Beachside.
Hey, good afternoon, Jefferson. Hope everybody's well out there. I'll be quick. I got a couple things. First thing, the Supreme Court's been bothering me, and it's been kind of in backside of the news here, and it's been ignored. But last week they took on they refused the Kentucky clerk, whatever, Kim Davis, for her opposing gay marriage. And then I heard after that, it really makes sense that they're not done with Obergefell. They want to go after it. They just want a stronger case, something with a little more teeth in it. So here's the thing. It always happens. They go after Obergefell, but Clarence Thomas conveniently forgets that Loving versus Virginia is in the way. If you're going to take it, do it all. Yeah. And, Loving versus Virginia was the interracial marriage, et cetera.
Yep.
And it boggles my mind that he conveniently forgets about that one. We don't want to touch that, but gay marriage, no. What do you think? I'm going on and on, but
yeah, no, you didn't go on and on. It's a good point, and I'll give just a little bit of back of the napkin court analysis. Thank you, and also a plug for donating blood, and thanks for all you do on that. I think Amy Coney Barrett is not Clarence Thomas. I believe they worship at many of the same values altars, but she has a little bit less interest in throwing out old precedent, a little bit less, and might prefer to avoid certain topics. But if it came to her, I think she'd probably vote bad.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Human beings have a couple of unique characteristics. The first is that we can be very tender and loving and concerned and caring toward people we perceive as being our group, us. We can also be extraordinarily violent against people that we consider to be them, if we think of them or this other as a threat. Probably the classic example of this is Adolf Hitler convincing Germans that, Jews were a threat to them and good Germans going along with the Holocaust. Well, this othering is built into our DNA. This is, ancient stuff. And the Republican Party, since the time of Nixon, when he started, picking up the white racist vote after Democrats laid it down in the 60s, the Republicans have been using this to try to other minorities in America as a political strategy. And this is really deadly stuff. There's a whole op-ed about it over at HartmannReport.com. Is othering human nature's deadliest instinct? Check it out.
We're back. We'll go back straight to your calls to Nancy from Oak Lawn. You're on the air.
Hi, Jefferson.
Hello.
Finally, thank you.
You win most patient listener award, but I knew you wanted to be, not during the interstitial. So go ahead.
Oh, well, I finally heard someone, that would be you, and your last couple callers, who finally said what I've been screaming about for over 50 years, because that's how old I am. I've been voting for 50 years. This is, the basic thing is you keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. What do you get? Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. Because that's what we get with a two-party system. And finally, said, what did you call it, your third?
I don't have a great name for it. I just call it an alternative, third pathway, third strategy, maybe.
Right. Okay. So it isn't just a third strategy. It is where we need more parties. And we've had control of, they have had control of us forever. Mm-hmm. Now, in the beginning, when it was two-party, undemocratic two-party system, okay, fine, it worked because the only people voting were the rich white men. Mm-hmm. Now, and the landowners, or whatever you want to say. But as the country developed and grew and evolved, the system did not. We still have the same, like you said, we still have the filibuster, only now it's watered down and it's worse than ever. We're not hearing each other anymore either. Now that the internet is involved and social media, forget it. We're not, who's listening to you? You're right. You have a smart group of listeners, but the point is the people who need to hear you and Tom and all the others aren't hearing you because all they're listening to is faux news. Mm-hmm. And that's the basic problem. We are being ruled by the minority, not being governed by the majority. Mm-hmm. We, the people, are the losers. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Why do you think we would never win the shutdown? Because you're not going to win against, what would you call them? They're crazy. They don't care about anybody. Yeah. As soon as you take out that equation, like you said, of empathy or compassion, forget it. You're never going to beat them because they don't care. They would have kept this government shutdown till next November. Yeah. And probably would have stopped the vote. Yeah. And even if they do win, nobody's ever going to convince me that he should have never been in our White House, and they could have stopped him. And no one's ever going to convince me that either of those elections, plus a lot of other elections, like when the not-so-Supreme Court selected the president rather than let us elect the president. And then, like you said, what's it tell you when you're talking about Joe Lieberman? He could have been our vice president.
Yep, he ran for vice president. But Nancy, I want to get to another caller. We're just about to end the show, and
thank you for letting me in.
And thank you, Nancy, very much. Raymond, you got like 30 seconds.
Hey, good morning. Excuse me. I think there needs to be more attention focused on future elections, because when Trump got elected to a second term, I can remember turning to my son in the kitchen and saying, you know what, there's not going to be any elections in 2026. And if there are elections in 2026, they're going to be so unfairly skewered to the other side that where Democrats or any left-leaning progressive candidate is not ever going to get back in office again. And, yeah, that just really concerns me, like, a lot.
Yeah, I hear you. And thank you for calling from Blue Lake, California. And it should. And as I said before, it's not, I think that modern marketers have impacted how political consultants think since the media age. And now they recognize that doing things kind of a little more coolly, a little more subtly, a little more gradually is more effective. That homeostasis is a powerful dynamic, a powerful reaction. You push too hard on something, it pushes back. It causes conflict and friction. You can't really get there. And that doesn't mean rhetorically Donald Trump has any subtlety, but it does mean that I think if there were announcements, sorry, folks, this year no election, imagine what the No Kings rally might look like. But if instead what you do is you redistrict every state that'll do it, you suppress every vote you can, you put jackboots near some number of voting booths, that if you try to not stop, 50 million people or 100 million people from voting, but you try to stop 5 million people from voting, then you can have much of the same electoral impact. And that is the kind of stuff to be watchful for. Well, we did this week, folks, a big week, and a lot going on, and I'm so grateful to each of you. I will be back with you next week. The ideas for topics, feel free to send them in. I got a bunch of stuff to get into. You are the coalition of the mentally irrational, the good people doing good things for no good reason, and you are priceless. Definition of priceless, worth a lot, not for sale. And with you, democracy has a chance. Love you all very much. Appreciate you all very much. I'll be back with you. Have a wonderful weekend.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.